Good morning. Thank you for joining us again for day 3 of the 2021 Joint Appropriations hearings. Excuse me. This time I'd like to ask Representative Leader Laricchia, if he doesn't mind leading us in our invocation.
Let's pray. Heavenly Father, God, we love you. Thank you for this day. God, thank you for all the blessings of life. Thank you for your grace and your mercy. Lord, we just ask for your guidance and your wisdom as we do the people's business, and remind us, Lord, and help us to be mindful that everything we do here will touch someone's life in some way, and that we would do our very best to be good stewards of the policies and the budgets, and to best serve the common good of every person in this state. And just keep your protection around us in this state. And God, the brave men and women that serve us to keep us free. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Thank you, Leader Laricchia. We have a full half day this morning, but remember, as soon as we are done with these meetings at noon, we'll have to break for a little bit, recess, as we then gather back again for the federally required federal block grant hearing at 1 o'clock. You're welcome to participate in that as well. So we'll run through this really quickly this morning. We'll have to break at noon to get prepared for that meeting, which is a public meeting required by federal law, and that will pick up at 1 p.m. Our first, Chairman England, let me give you an opportunity to give some opening comments before we begin this morning.
Well, not really opening comments, just housekeeping as always. Members of House and Senate Appropriations Committee, if you would just be sure to log in through your Zoom link, and that's for the members of the committee. That way you will have the ability to do the chat, to ask your questions. Those members of the House and Senate that are not members of the Appropriations Committee, we again ask that you would go into the streaming app, the streaming link, so that we don't eat up all of our bandwidth with so many folks coming and going through Zoom. That will help us an awful lot. Also, just remember that if you're a House member that you need to get tested for COVID-19 downstairs this morning from 7 to 11. You will need to have a negative test that has occurred between today and next Tuesday in order to come back to the building. So remember, again, 7 to 11 downstairs with our friends from Georgia Tech that are doing the testing. If you're not here, please refer to the memo from the speaker yesterday or late yesterday afternoon about getting tested before you come back from your homes up here next week. Again, trying to keep all of our fellow members safe and healthy, and our staff members safe and healthy as well. Mr. Chairman, that's all I've got. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman England. Again, thank you to our friends at Georgia Tech. They were down here this morning around 6:45, 6:30, started early this morning, and we appreciate their help downstairs. With that being said, I believe Commissioner Crittenden is already on the line. Good morning, Commissioner.
Good morning.
Thank you for joining us this morning. We look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you.
Your slideshow is up, and please proceed.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman England, Chairman Tillery, and committee members. Thank you for this opportunity to come before you to discuss the governor's budget recommendations for the Department of Human Services for the amended fiscal year 2021 and for state fiscal year 2022. My name is Robin Crittenden, and I'm Commissioner of the Department of Human Services, and I'm joined here today by several members of my leadership team. The Department of Human Services vision, next page, please. The Department of Human Services vision is to build stronger families for a stronger Georgia. With each policy, program, and service we provide, we ask ourselves, does this help build stronger families and, as a result, a stronger Georgia? And this year, we've been asking ourselves that question quite a lot as we've made changes to how we work and how we do business during a global pandemic. As of March 23rd, the majority of our workforce transitioned to work remotely. Child support customers are directed to self-service options for conducting business with the department. And in the event we are unable to resolve a customer inquiry remotely, staff see customers in the office. Both Adult Protective Services and Public Guardianship have also continued to provide their services. In this new environment, productivity is stable and all employees have the equipment required to work from home. There has been no disruption in services and frontline staff receive proper PPE. With our mission in mind, here's how we use our resources to accomplish our goals, adhere to the law governing our programs, and hold ourselves accountable to the public trust. DHS has about $1.6 billion allocated to protect and serve Georgia's vulnerable populations. When you add the budgets of our attached entities, the total for the department's fiscal year 2021 budget allocation is $1.8 billion. Now we will look at the governor's recommendations for DHS. Next slide, please. Overall, for DHS, the governor has recommended an amended fiscal year 2021 budget of $800.4 million in state funds and $803.9 million in state funds for fiscal year 2022. This amounts to an increase in expenditures of $4.4 million for amended fiscal year 2021, and for fiscal year 2022, an increase in expenditures of $7.9 million. The governor's recommendation includes a statewide adjustment for the teachers' retirement system of just under $2,500 for fiscal year 2022. Next page, please. Now referencing pages 194 and 198 of the governor's budget report for departmental administration, in amended fiscal year 2021, a reduction of $537,000 to reflect the 6.2% increase of the Enhanced Federal Medical Assistance Percentage, or EFMAP, during the COVID-19 public health emergency. And in fiscal year 2022, an increase of $496,000 to reflect an adjustment in the EFMAP from 76.92% to 76.80%. Also, for departmental administration, the governor has recommended providing funds to begin the implementation of the Patients First Act, which was passed during the 2019 session. DHS is responsible for the system upon which the program will operate. In amended fiscal year 2021, $4 million in state funds and $7 million in state funds in fiscal year 2022 to assist Georgians with affordable health care. The governor's final recommendation for departmental administration is an increase of $1.3 million for the Georgia Gateway Cloud Migration implementation. Next page, please. Referencing page 198 of the governor's budget report, for fiscal year 2022, the governor has recommended for elder abuse investigations and prevention an increase of $973,000 in state funds for an additional 13 Adult Protective Services caseworker positions to investigate reports of abuse, neglect, and exploitation of seniors and adults with disabilities. An increase of $231,000 in state funds for 3 additional Public Guardianship Office caseworkers to coordinate and monitor all services needed for the health and welfare of our guardianship clients, and an increase of $71,000 for 1 additional central intake position to support the additional caseworkers. Next page, please. Also on page 198 of the governor's budget report, The governor has proposed combining the Elder Support Services Program budget with the Elder Community Living Services Program budget. The governor is not recommending a change in expenditures. The recommendation is to combine the two program budgets that cover the same services, such as home and community-based services and Medicare counseling. Next page, please. The Families First Coronavirus Response Act, or FFCRA, is an act of Congress meant to respond to the economic impacts of the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. Among other things, the act provided funding for free coronavirus testing and 14 days paid leave for American workers affected by the pandemic. The Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Securities Act, or CARES Act, provides fast and direct economic assistance for American workers and families and small businesses and preserves jobs for American industries. Next page, please. DHS received $6.5 million in FFCRA funds to provide home-delivered meals to Georgia's vulnerable and disabled populations, and $23.3 million in CARES Act funds for home-delivered meals and to aid these individuals with supportive services such as personal support services and assistive technology that allows them to remain in their homes. With the exception of long-term care ombudsman and ADRC funds, all funds were sent to AAAs. Next page, please. The Georgia Vocational Rehabilitation Agency, Council on Aging, Family Connection Partnership, and Safe Harbor for Sexually Exploited Children Fund Commission are attached to DHS for administrative purposes only. Next page, please. The governor has not recommended any changes to the budgets for the Council on Aging or the Family Connection Partnership. These are the governor's recommendations for the entities that are administratively attached to DHS. This slide provides contact information for leadership of the attached entities should you have any questions. Next slide, please. That concludes the governor's recommendations for the Department of Human Services amended fiscal year 2021 and fiscal year 2022 budgets. Before I leave, I want to bring to your attention that detailed information on the department's performance and accomplishments for state fiscal year 2020 is available in our state fiscal year 2020 annual report. A link to the report was sent to all members of the General Assembly on December 29, 2020. However, you may also locate the report on our website at dhs.georgia.gov. Thank you for this opportunity to speak to you today. Please do not hesitate to contact me with any additional questions you may have. I'm happy to take any questions you have today. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Let me ask you a question first to start off, if you don't mind. Thank you for what you and your department have done during this pandemic. Can you tell us what stressor or issue you faced that's been biggest because of this pandemic and how you've addressed it?
I think many people were faced with having to get the personal protective equipment, and it was not initially available for everyone to get. And so we have been able to secure that for all of our employees. And we are currently, our employees are able to go out into the field to work with customers. We were very lucky. We were ahead of the curve in several of our areas. Child support has, over the last few years, done several improvements that allow customers to work with us remotely, either through our mobile app or through our chat function. It's become a preferred way for customers to interact with us. And so we have been able to expand and continue those services and only meet with people in person when necessary. The other area, 2 areas would be our adult protective services and public guardianship, where they do go out and meet with clients. We did a significant amount of that work using telephone meetings and Zoom and Microsoft Teams, all those kinds of resources, until we were able to get the PPE and able to go out and visit with people. The same has happened with our residential childcare licensing area. And so we've been working in that area hard as well.
Thank you. We understand that your agency has been one of the leaders at moving away from maybe the old model of meeting at an office and then going out, but to instead leave from home and almost becoming more home offices, car offices, et cetera. We look forward to working with you and keeping up with how that works for productivity. And also if there's a need to maybe keep moving in that direction going forward, if productivity continues to remain at the levels that your department's been able to obtain so far.
I've been very pleased and encouraged by the work that we've been able to do this way. We basically went to remote overnight, and we were able to secure equipment for all of our employees to do that and to be able to work from home. And everybody has really done a tremendous job with the work.
We're not always known for our flexibility, but it appears that you have done a great job of leading your agency to try to be flexible as quick as possible. So thank you for your leadership there. We have a couple of other questions. The first one, I believe, comes from the audience, and it's going to be from Chairwoman Dempsey.
Yes. Good morning, Commissioner. I just want to say thank you. I personally witnessed much of the work that your team members have done, and you as well as the leader. And I want to say thank you. That's an area where we didn't actually know we could do as much as we could, not in person. So I just want to join Chairman Tillery, I know Chairman England, also in applauding the work that you've done and looking forward to the great work we're going to do in this next year.
Thank you very much.
I think we have an additional question online. Chairman England.
Good morning, Madam Commissioner. Good to see you as always. We do have one question online from Senator Ben Watson, and he's just asking about the timeline on implementation of Patients First. I think y'all are the ones handling the qualification piece of that, and he's just asking what the timeline is there.
So I'm going to defer to Tom Rollins, who I know is going to be speaking to you, as well as Commissioner Berry and Blake Fullenwilder, to go into detail. We're handling the actual system behind it, and the plan being for completion of that for first rollout in July.
Okay, all right. We'll stay tuned for that. Have one other one from Representative Jesse Petrie, and just asking for an update on the long-term care you know what I'm trying to say, ombudsman. Still suffering COVID brain here, so I'm sorry about that. The efforts there in nursing homes and ALFs currently.
Yes, as you know, that area is run by Melanie McNeil. She's the executive director of that area. And so I would ask if it's okay, I will have her reach back out to you to answer your questions.
Absolutely, that's fine.
Commissioner Crittenden, thank you again for your presentation today. Appreciate you, and again, appreciate the leadership you're bringing to move DHS forward in things that may carry on even after this pandemic has subsided. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you very much.
Next, we have with us falling right in line, Director Tom Rollins from the Division of Family and Children's Services under the Department of Human Resources. Director Rollins, thanks for being with us here today. We'll get your mic on.
All right. Thank you, Chairman Tillery, Chairman Nagle. Good to be with y'all today. We got a slideshow, I hope. going to go ahead and launch right into this thing. DFACS, of course, is the largest division of the Department of Human Services, about $1.4 billion in state and federal funding. I think what you're going to see today, you can go on to the first actual slide there, please, with data on it. Here we go. What you're going to see today is represents a couple of different trends. Number one, we, of course, at our department, we're responsible for eligibility for SNAP, that's food stamps, for Medicaid, for TANF, for a few other similar programs. Over the last 11 months, we have put about $3.5 billion in food security funds, and especially SNAP and the PEBT program, into the Georgia economy across the state, which I'm proud of our workers for doing. As Commissioner Crittenden said, we made a very, very quick transition from a situation in which folks came into the office oftentimes to apply for benefits to one in which folks were certainly working from home and out in the field. The other part of our agency, of course, we got about 7,000 employees, and half of those are in our Office of Family Independence or Eligibility, the other half in child welfare. And so the other trends we have seen, of course, we have had a significant reduction in the number of reports coming in because children were out of school. However, I think we have been able to maintain good watchful eyes, to use our good radar system out there of mandated reporters and other folks to keep children safe. At the same time, since March of 18, we have decreased the number of children in foster care by 3,800. That's about 25%. So that is a significant cost savings, and those savings as we move forward are being shifted into other areas. Especially we'll see them shifted into more efforts in keeping children safe within the community and with relatives. The other trend that I'm very pleased about is the overall increase over the last few years in the number of children being adopted out of our foster care system. Of course, there are about 3 or 4 times as many children adopted through private agencies, but most of the children that are adopted from our system have special needs, and they qualify for adoption assistance, which is primarily federal funds. So we have needed to, as we have had more adoptions, we have increased those funds. Let me go very briefly over what we're seeing in terms of the actual budget. Amended 21 budget in adoption services, we normally might be coming here and asking you for additional adoption assistance funds. However, because as Commissioner Crittenden said, we have this additional 6.2% COVID increase in our federal participation, which allows us to realize a cost savings of $3.5 million. So that's really a flat on our budget overall. DFACS administration as well. We essentially, as we have increased the number of folks on food stamps because of the pandemic, we've also had to increase some of the administrative expenses associated with that. The net on that is about $412,000 additional that you'll see is actually being shifted out of other areas. So the third thing on here, 1344 and federal eligibility benefit services, we really represent somewhat of a sort of some accounting. We have, for the 21 year, about $500,000 in SNAP appeal costs and about $250,000 in Medicaid appeal costs for the Office of State Administrative Hearings. So we kind of worked out an arrangement with them to shift some funds to actually cover those costs. Additionally, in the next slide, please, in the federal eligibility benefits system, you heard, and you'll see this trend continue in 2022, you heard about the Patients First Act. We expect about 50,000 additional individuals to qualify for some kind of medical coverage under that act. And of course, as the agency that is responsible for doing the eligibility, we need the staffing to help do that. So another $707,000 to begin implementing that this year. There was a question as to when the act is going to take effect. We're anticipating July of this year. I understand that what we're doing right now, though, is really building the system. So you're going to see, as you saw in the commissioner's budget, you'll see in the DCH budget, funding to cover both the actual insurance benefits as well as significant funding to build the additional computer and data systems necessary to enact that. Our portion, of course, is to cover the staffing costs associated with it. Let's see, in the out-of-home care, you'll see that we are reducing for 21. Part of that, the reason we're able to reduce that is, number one, we have less out-of-home care costs, less foster care costs, but also additionally, as I said, the 6.2% additional federal funds coming into the system, and the FMAP is really helping us out and helping us save those state dollars. So essentially, same thing with the SNAP program, a little bit of reduction there. And then we go to the 2022 budget. This is where we have a slight increase. So as we have the numbers of children being adopted from foster care, I'm sorry, you can go to the next slide. We have this increasing caseload on adoption assistance, about $4.5 million. We expect also the FMAP bump that we've been getting will go away, so we'll need to increase a little bit of adoption services money by about $114,000. In child abuse and neglect prevention, you'll see that there's a zero figure, but what we are doing is recognizing that we have received about $1.1 million into the Children's Trust Fund, which goes, of course, to child abuse and prevention work from various marriage and divorce fee collections. In federal eligibility benefit services, 1521, a slight bump due to the retirement system. And then the next page, you'll see, this is the another big bump, which is that we are increasing, skip the page. It's not a big bump here. Federal eligibility benefit services, again, that funding for the state office of administrative hearings, about $750,000. And then as I said, a continuation of the staffing for the Patients First Act, increase of $943,000. In the out-of-home care budget, which is the next one, which is our most significant decrease. Every 1,000 children in foster care, we spend about $23 million, $20 to $23 million. As we've reduced those numbers significantly, we've started to realize savings from that. Again, what we want, our goal is that, as my friend Mike Keyes, the judge down in LaGrange says, we want every child who needs to be in foster care to be in foster care and not one more. So we have worked very hard to keep children close with their families in relative kinship placements and voluntary kinship placements while we are actually serving those children in the community. That's extremely important. It's also much more cost effective and also better for the child because it doesn't have that trauma associated with removal and the disruption of families. So we've been overall able to decrease our out-of-home care for the 2022 budget by $14.4 million. There's a little bit of increase. You'll see some FMAP changes, $80,000. And then finally on the next page, as y'all, I think, are aware, with the introduction or the launching and implementation next fall of the Family First Prevention Services Act, we will not be able to use the federal 4E funds for reimbursement for our group homes. However, we intend to continue to use those wonderful, valuable partners. So we'll be increasing those state funds by about $6.5 million. The bottom line here, folks, is that our overall budget is about $7.8 million less than it was in the 21 cycle. But at the same time, we are quite happy that we are able to do that, because I think the savings we have realized actually reflect substantive improvements in our work. And of course, I also want to thank y'all, because last summer, y'all were very kind to us, and we took, I think our overall cut was about 3%. So we are doing, I think, well as an agency. We are able to take a few reductions here and there, or a few increases there and there, and we're frankly happy with everything. The other thing I want to mention that's not reflected in our budget, but you'll see it sort of as an asterisk in the DCH budget perhaps, is that we are looking at implementing a Medicaid-funded therapeutic foster care benefit for children, both children who are in our custody who need that intensive service, but also for families whose children may be coming into our custody were it not for the fact that they just simply need some real serious services, and we want to be able to provide those services before they have to come into our custody. And so that's going to that expense right now is we're still working on it. We're going to be working with DCH and Medicaid. We've worked with the Senate and the House budget offices and the Lieutenant Governor's office and the Governor's office for quite some time on this, but we anticipate it will bear fruit in the coming months. And I think it's one of the things I'm most excited about. Do y'all have any questions? Oh, let me mention one other thing. The Safe Harbor Commission is not actually listed here. It's somewhere else. Safe Harbor Commission is our, it's not really an attached agency, but it's sort of under our purview. This is the commission that will be funding the battle against commercial sexual exploitation of children. We have realized funds from various fees tacked on to adult establishments. We'll be budgeting about $300,000 for Amended 21, and then in 22, about $350,000 we'll be able to use to provide those services, working very closely with the Committee on, the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council and the First Lady's Grace Commission. I apologize for admitting that. Chairman?
Thank you, Director Rollins. We do have a couple of questions. First, looks like it comes from Leader Laricchia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Director Rollins, and thank you for visiting with me in my office the other day. You know that this is foster and adoption has been something that I've had a passion for, and you know that First Lady Kemp, is
yes, sir,
really working hard on this. And I mentioned to you about a ministry down in South Georgia called To Care, and you're familiar with them. And I've run into a lot of families that aren't necessarily prepared to foster, with the commitment with having biological children in the home and those kind of things. But it was brought to my attention that there may be a way to connect families from the faith community, families from within these communities, to partner with foster families to help support them as they foster. I don't know how that would work officially or legally, but I just wanted to kind of get your thoughts. We talked about that a little bit, and this would be a neat opportunity for you to address that and how important these churches and charities and nonprofits are to supporting these families who have made the sacrifice to foster these children.
Yes, sir. I appreciate the opportunity. One of the I've been doing this work about 20 years now. I think, as many of y'all know, we used to go around to the churches and say, would y'all like to foster? And people would say, it's a little scary. You're taking a child in your home, you have to work with the government. It's kind of a difficult thing to do. In the last few years, there have been a number, especially church-based, but faith-based nonprofit groups that have popped up around the state. Call to Care is a great one, Chosen for Life. Promise 686, I'm sure I've left out some, and I apologize to my friends out there who are doing this work. But what they have done is sort of taken the sticking their toe in the water, so to speak. They get churches especially to say, could you prepare a meal for a foster family? Could you babysit for a foster family? And last year, of course, we made it a little easier for folks to babysit for a child in foster care. Could you do the laundry for them? Could you help? Chairman Tillery himself had hosted a date night for foster parents one time a couple of years ago, and at his church, and the foster parents got to get together, have a get together, and do stuff, and while somebody was watching the children. And this is a wonderful, wonderful way to introduce folks to the child protection system, to what they can do. And many of those have gone on to be either respite foster parents themselves or even full-fledged foster parents. So I greatly appreciate the opportunity and really want to encourage the growth of groups like this. We are doing so through our State of Hope program, which makes some seed grants around the state to such groups, as well as other nonprofits. And I would highly encourage folks to come on our website and especially talk to our strategic innovation team and our outreach partnerships team and see what they can do. So thank you.
We've got a couple of questions online.
Okay, first one comes from Senator Orrock. Please share information on services provided to support families to avoid out-of-home placements. And she goes on to say, thank you for your leadership too.
Sure. So there are lots of them. So we have a lot of grants out there under the Promoting Safe and Stable Families program that are really, if you start at the beginning, food stamps themselves, of course, are a way to keep families together. We have funds that we can use, for example, for some housing assistance to keep people in a stable situation, to provide counseling for families. I would just basically say that about 85% of our work actually is focused on keeping those children in the community. Most of that comes from TANF funding. Some of it comes from other federal funding sources, prevention funds. But I think the key for us is really is the child safe. And what we're really doing, we're going through a process right now of if a child is in danger, that we're certainly trying to keep the child in a safe situation, preferably with a relative, and those are some more intensive services. What we're really working on right now is those situations that involve cases of poverty, housing assistance, just need. And we're trying to do a better job of doing a warm handoff for those folks to community-based organizations. We believe the state is not the end-all be-all. It is the local community, the local extended family, the neighbors who are so good at stepping in. We just got to do a better job of letting them know the need. And so I'll give one example. We have the Care Portal, which is a great service that many of our partners are using now. When we can say this family needs this to be able to stay in that home or to be able to get what they need. And someone from the community will say, I'll buy that, I'll do that. And so this is the kind of community partnerships we're doing to try to keep folks together. So thank you, Senator.
Okay, the next one's coming from Representative Carolyn Hughley, and she's just asking, I guess, for a little updated information on what your kinship care cost and supports have increased since you're having to utilize more family care to avoid putting children into foster care.
I don't have the details on the actual kinship costs, and I'll be happy to provide those to her. I'll get Cliff to kind of put them together, but I can tell you generally that I think it was last year, maybe the year before, we increased for the children in state custody with a relative, we increased substantially the per diem rate. So it's almost what you get as a foster parent. We also are able to provide, like for grandparents raising grandchildren, there's a DHS program that provides some stipends there. There's also the ability to get child-only TANF or temporary assistance for needy families to support. What I am working towards is sort of a lower tier where we can actually provide more support for a child who is not in our formal custody. And I think under Family First Prevention Services Act, we'll have, once we implement that, we'll have more opportunity to spend those funds. Child care is very important for these folks. That's one of the most expensive things that keeps relatives from taking in their relative kin, because they got to pay child care for them. And child care is darn expensive. So we're working with DECAL, internally within our folks, to devise a better package for those situations where the child is not in our custody, but we still need to be providing financial support to the family so we can keep that child out of state custody.
Got another question from online, and then we've got several in the audience as well. First one from online. What is the source of collections and the breakdown via agency collecting referenced in the funding request for the Safe Harbor Commission?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, let me see if I can read that and break it down again.
Sure.
I'm going to read it verbatim. What is the source of collections and the breakdown of versus agency collecting referenced in the funding request for Safe Harbor?
I can get you the exact amounts from the Attorney General's office. So This, as y'all recall, the Safe Harbor Commission was set up. There were some fees and some court fines, I think, associated with trafficking and other bad sexual crimes. There were some fees associated with adult establishments of various types, strip bars for one. There has been a lawsuit pending for a couple of years now challenging our ability to collect some of these funds. However, overall, we have about 650,000, it's not exactly right, about 650 in the fund. And we feel that we can start going forward to issue some, to use some of those funds without fear of some court later coming back and telling us that it's not, you know, we're gonna have to give it back. I think we're okay on that, but the lawsuit has still not been resolved. But if you will ask the questioner to let me know, I'll be happy to get them an exact breakdown of where those funds are coming from.
Gotcha. Will do. Thank you. Senator Beach.
Yeah, Director Rollins, thank you for what you're doing. And we've
Yes, sir.
made great strides in foster care over the years. And one of the organizations in my district, Faith Bridge, has done a real good job.
Yeah.
You mentioned several of them. But my question to you is this. At 18, when these kids age out of the foster care system, is there any program to help them get into a technical college, or do we just throw them out to the society and say, good luck? Are we helping them transition, if you will?
I appreciate y'all letting me plan all these great questions out there so I can talk about my programs. Senator Beach, we actually encourage children who are going to hit 18 without permanency not to leave foster care. We have, they can stay until they're 21, and in fact, we're letting them stay as long as they need to, even up to, I think the latest federal law allows us to provide services to them until they're 26 temporarily. But so we are keeping, to the greatest extent possible, we're keeping them in our care. We're helping them to live independently, to learn life skills. We have educational vouchers so that they can go to technical college or college. We've even had them go to grad school. We have additional, continued support in terms of skill learning and just, support from both our agency and a caseworker and the courts. And so we have actually increased the number of they're not children anymore, young adults who are still in our under our watch by about 100, up to about 800 now, I think, in the last year or so. And we're really trying to encourage that. And in fact, I think you're going to see some legislation that even further addresses how we can support those younger adults as they become adults.
Success so that we can brag about that and get other kids to do it?
We are. In fact, every year we have what we call the Celebration of Excellence. And a lot of those young people are folks who graduated from either stayed in foster care and graduated from high school, technical college, you name it. It's a little more difficult as they get older because, we do track it, but we also know that sometimes when they get out of our system, like at 21 and they're gone, they say, I don't want to fool with y'all anymore. I've had enough. But we are doing a very good job. We have the National Youth and Transition Database, and we do our best to track outcomes for those young people.
Thank you, Director. The question for those of you who are listening online was Senator Beach was asking if we're tracking our progress through those things. And thank you for your answer, Director Rollins. We accidentally cut Senator Beach's comment off online, so we apologize. But we did, I think your answer helped explain what he was asking. So who we got next? Chair Lady Dempsey.
Good morning, Director. Thank you for the great work you've done through this amazing time. I think to hear those numbers that are going down and the decreases in places are so very important. I've been asked to ask you for an update on the LEADS funding and that program. Members may not really be as aware of that and some of the good work that allows.
And Chair Dempsey, I got to try to remember a little bit where we are. I recall that this was a wonderful program that my predecessor, Bobby Nagle, started. This was the idea that, we knew that we were not that our youth who had left foster care were not graduating certainly from high school or on time as much. And so we worked with the Multi-Agency Alliance on Children to set up the LEADS program, funded it with a couple of different $1 million over a few years. And they have gone out and really built tutoring teams. They're working with youth. They have done a wonderful job in increasing the the graduation rates for youth who have been in care and who are still in care. As I recall, what happened was we had to cut that a little bit because of the pandemic economy. We have worked with them to get additional philanthropic funding, and we have promised them this once we get out of the COVID era, which I think will be next year, that we're going to do our best to restore that funding on state level, and that's my promise. This is my 3rd year here, and I intend to be here. So my commitment to them is to ask for that funding to be restored.
Pro Tem Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to reference something that the chairman said yesterday. When we look at the budget, we see dollars in the budget, but behind those are human beings.
Yes.
And your agency is dealing with the most vulnerable of our entire society.
Yes, sir.
And I appreciate very much the work you're doing.
Thank
And
you.
I've witnessed firsthand the results that you're producing, and we're grateful for it. Can you tell us a little bit about this is a high stress job for all your folks. And can you tell us about the morale, tell us about the turnover, kind of bring us up to date. I know we were having some really severe issues a year or two ago, and seems to have subsided.
So one of the things that we noted, first of all, back, say March of 18, that area when we had really high foster care numbers, what we were seeing was extremely high turnover, and our HR system was not being very responsive to that. It's a little bit before I came in. One of the things that we did when I came in, this is obviously prior to COVID, is we started hiring. And we hired about 500 new workers. So what we found was that, in fact, we're working with the National Child Welfare Workforce Institute right now on about a 4-year project to deal with morale, retention, recruiting, that kind of thing. And what we found is a couple of different things. Number one, our folks don't mind the stress of dealing with the families we serve. They don't like the stress of bureaucracy and administration. So we have had a few initiatives. Yes, sir. Amen. We've had a couple initiatives, and one is what I call just culture, which is I don't care where you are in the organization, you need to be heard, but especially if you're on the street. If you're out there doing the work, we need to hear you. We need to also free you up. There's a great book that I read a long time ago, and it's my foundation for management. People who are doing good work, especially professional work, they need to feel purpose in what they're doing. So we try to encourage them all the time that what they're doing is valuable. We try to surround them with folks like Call to Care and other groups that are coming in and they're taking our caseworkers out to lunch and supporting them, inviting them to church, so they know that the work they're doing is meaningful. Number two, give them autonomy and discretion. Don't tell those caseworkers, this is what you must do today or else. You say, how would you address this issue? Let's use your professional judgment. Let's help you develop your discretion. Number three is mastery. We've got to continue to educate them. It's a little bit, it's difficult with everybody working remotely. I would say that certainly our retention rate has increased, but I can't promise you that's not because of the COVID. But what we have tried to address is ensuring that we have enough people to do the job, reducing the work level, and we actually have some technology projects in the works that will also reduce the paperwork and administrative overburden.
So the turnover has gone down.
Yes, sir, it has.
Good.
And I can get you
I wanted to hear you say that because I wanted everybody to know that. Okay.
I'll get you some exact figures. It's gone down. Like I said, it's, I would like to say that's completely because of my wonderful, leadership knows, but part of it's because of the COVID, because folks don't want to change jobs. But I do think we're doing a better job throughout the agency in terms of motivating people that this is the kind of place y'all need to be here for 20 years, develop good professional judgment, and know how to do your work well. Thank you.
Chairman Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director, thank you for what
Yes,
you
sir.
do. You got a hard job, but a rewarding job. I mean,
Very.
helping our children. My question is about a facility down in Davisboro,
Yeah, Broken Shackle.
Broken Shackles, and I know you're familiar with it.
Yes, sir.
Family-based run organization. You know, they help these children. They go the extra mile and help these children get the GED. And but then also they have a certified welding shop, certified automotive, and cabinet shop to teach these young boys a trade. But they don't get no assistance on the state level for them 3 certified programs. Is there any way maybe in the future we can see?
Yes, sir. I'll talk to David. You know, David and Gary and I have been friends for a long time. And I'll be happy to talk to them. You know, certainly we have an agreement with them, a contract with them. We do them per diem rate, but we'll see what else we can do. They also have a wonderful transitional living program. Center Beach was talking about kids aging out of the system. And one of the things that Broken Shackle does very well is take those young men. Sometimes they come from the juvenile justice background, sometimes from our agency, and really train them and give them a skill and then help them get a job out in the community when they turn 20 or so. And it's a great program, but I will talk to y'all about what we can do to help out more.
Thank you.
Sir.
Director Rollins, one last question. You may have mentioned this and I missed it, didn't write it down. You talked about, and we're so proud that the fact of our numbers of children in foster care across Georgia have fallen. Can you give us the numbers of what that was in maybe FY19 versus now or some other,
yes,
whatever other year you pick?
I can give you exact numbers. The high water mark was approximately March of 2018. We had right at 15,000. Today we have 11,200. We've had just a steady decrease, certainly before COVID, but even now. The numbers, as you can imagine, have picked up a little bit lately just because more schools are back in, and I think we've kind of caught up with situations. And I think we would actually be decreasing the numbers more rapidly were it not for the fact that the courts are still not having, some of them are not having regular hearings. So we've got to have those hearings to move those children out to successful permanency. My concern is always going to be, can this child be safely maintained with his parents or in his community with a relative? If so, then let's surround that child and his family with the services they need so they can keep going to their old school with their old friends, go to the same church, play baseball, do all that kind of fun stuff that regular kids do, and not have to be separated from their family. We're also looking, I think, at more of we need to be doing better decision-making up front about fishing or cutting bait. So if you have a situation where you can know up front that a child should not be going back home, then we need to go ahead and move that child to permanent, safe guardianship or adoption. So thank you.
You picked up another question in your detailed answer there, Chairman England.
Yeah, and Director, this kind of, I guess, flows into that and a little bit of what you've already talked about. But Senator Orrock is asking, what are caseloads looking like right now compared to past years? Are we up, down?
They're down somewhat. They're certainly down compared to like 3 or 4 years ago. I need to get, it does vary from place to place, so I'll need to get her the details. I think the average, obviously in the metro area where I have most of our kids, the caseloads are very reasonable. A lot of that is because we've really taken significant measures to make sure that we're complying with the Kenny A consent decree. Out in the rural areas, they can fluctuate a little bit more because especially as as someone leaves and we're trying to get a replacement for that person, which is, as you can imagine, is a little more difficult out in some parts of the state to get somebody who wants to go to, a smaller county.
Those are the last question that we had. Thank you again, Director, for being here, and we're really proud to hear about those numbers across the state. Thank you for your work.
Well, thank you, and I just want to once again appreciate all the work and all the help y'all have given me over the last 3 years or so, and it's been wonderful, and I just love working with y'all, and I'm so glad to be here. So thank you.
Just another housekeeping announcement reminder. The chat function on the Zoom platform is for members of the committee to use to ask their questions. Again, if you're not a member of the Appropriations Committee, either Senate or House, please send your question through a committee member to ask them to ask it for you in the chat function. Again, the chat function is for Appropriations Committee members only. I know that we've made that announcement a few times, and we may have made it when folks were not on or not listening, but I just want to reiterate that. We're trying to function here just like we would in a normal committee meeting where everyone's in person and committee members only have the opportunity to ask those questions. So just that kind, subtle reminder one more time, the chat box is for committee members to use to ask their questions. If you're watching as a member of the House or Senate and not a member of the committee, please again, send those questions to someone who is on the committee. I'm sure they will be more than happy to ask those questions or submit those questions for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman England. At 9 a.m., we're actually 1 minute ahead of schedule, but I believe Commissioner Berry is already with us. Commissioner Berry, can you hear us?
I can hear you.
You may be muted on your end. We can see you.
What about now?
Nope, you're not muted on your end. Maybe it's our end.
What about now?
We can hear you now. It's a little bit soft.
All right, let's see if we pull up a little bit. Is that any better? How's that?
Frank Berry of the Department of Community Health, thank you for being with us, and your slide shows up. Commissioner, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Chairman England, Chairman Tillery, Chairman Parrish, Chairman Dr. Senator Burke, thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak with you today. I know we have quite a bit of time. We'll try to get through as quickly as possible, but I want to give a comprehensive overview of what the Department of Community Health has been up to for the last year. I also wanted to take a few moments to recognize a few other key people. And every day I've come in, and today is no different other than on the days that we present to the Joint Appropriations Committee, you get a little bit more excited and the butterflies in your tummy get a little bit more rambunctious. But it's never something that we take for granted. And your support has been incredible. I also want to recognize Tara Burkholt and Melody, Martha Wigton, and I know Katie Dempsey is in the audience as a former chair of mine in another department. Certainly want to recognize her, and President Pro Tem Miller for reaching out to all of you, for reaching out during the last 10 months to check on how the department's doing and how our staff are doing. We are grateful for that. I also want to recognize the DCH team. Without them, we would not be in the situation we're in of being able to handle some of the many challenges that we've been faced with. They've worked nonstop. I remember back in March, I believe it was March 14th, telling everybody that we're going to work remotely for a couple of weeks. And some of our team members we haven't seen in 10 months personally or face-to-face, but we've seen them on a computer through Teams calls and Zoom calls and haven't missed a beat. And I want to recognize the DCH team more now than ever during this pandemic. I want to thank Governor Kemp for allowing me to serve with him and his team during this time. It's a true honor to be a part of a team, and I believe that being a part of a team is what makes this all rewarding and makes us successful. I remember back in March starting calls with the governor and his team, and I think a lot of people don't recognize this or realize this. We've had calls every single week, every single day for almost 10 months, and the governor hasn't missed a single call. He constantly asks for solutions to problems that we've been faced with and then gives the approval to move forward with some of those solutions. Two members of his team that stand out, Ryan Loke and Kaylee Nagle, have been with us from day one when we first were assigned to GEMA and then went to the National Guard and then went to the Georgia World Congress Center. And without their support and guidance and leadership, again, we wouldn't be in the situation we're in the positive situation we're in. John Hopper and Matt Hicks from Grady, the partnership, when we stood up with our other state agencies and the governor's office, when we stood up the Georgia World Congress Center, we needed an anchor hospital. And Grady was right there with us and said, we'll do it, no questions asked. Not what's in it for me from a financial standpoint, but how do we move forward and get this thing up and running? And just what a remarkable job Matt Hicks has done working with us, again, at GEMA, at the National Guard, at the World Congress Center, and on an ongoing basis. My point for bringing some of this up is that I believe that state government is good and that we partner with private sector people and we become better. I believe that the state agencies do a remarkable job of handling challenges that we're faced with. We've partnered with Kevin Brown and Dr. Batty and Dr. Cohn and Kelly Halsey at Piedmont Hospital to increase bed capacity by over 100 beds. They've also decided that one of the critical aspects that we need to do is infusion clinics for monoclonal antibody infusions, and we've been working with them on that for almost 6 months. We have weekly calls with them to discuss strategy on how we do a better job of helping people. And helping people is the most critical thing in saving lives that we believe our department has played a key role in as part of the team that's been looking at this. Emory Hospital, Dr. Bryce Gartland coming to the table with offers of more bed space so that people could be served closer to home, not just serving their population that normally they serve, but anybody who needs that hospital bed can have access to the beds at Emory. Northeast Georgia Health System with Carol Burrell and Deb Bailey, who have been just hit so hard for months and months and months, and their teams that have done a remarkable job of serving people and trying to keep people alive. And we've partnered with them with staff augmentation and pods, medical units that are in parking lots to help them, but they've never given up and they've never said, we just can't do any more. It's always, what else can we do to be helpful? In Wellstar, just yesterday, as a matter of fact, under Candace Saunders and Brandon Reese and Mary Chapman at Kennestone, we heard of a wife and a coach. The wife has been hospitalized for 11 days. They had never been separated. And the husband went into the hospital the day before yesterday, and they figured out a creative way to get them to share a room together. It's those kinds of stories that make you realize there are great things that have happened during this pandemic in regards to helping people. I want to recognize Russell Carlson, the Georgia Healthcare Association. Daily calls for months and months and months about how we can do better with tracking data and getting vaccines and helping them with staff so that they can provide ongoing care to the residents of their associations. And the Georgia Hospital Association, Anna Adams, who's been with us again at GEMA, at the National Guard, at the Georgia World Congress Center, 24/7. If we needed the hospitals to do a certain thing on behalf of the governor or schedule meetings or work on surveys, Anna has been there nonstop. And the clinical expertise of Colonel Julio Larray from the Georgia National Guard and Colonel Louis Perino, who have helped us from day one with tracking data and looking at projections so that we can be better prepared to continue to battle this pandemic. We'll be forever grateful for their support. And the other state agencies that I just can't thank enough, DPH, Dr. Toomey. People tend to forget that it was close to 100 degrees many of those days that their staff were out in those parking lots doing testing. And the summer hours and the long hours doing the testing, and now the immunization work and vaccination work and everything else. DBHDD, Commissioner Fitzgerald, who runs 5 state hospitals, and under her medical director, Dr. Emil Risby, making certain, and we've done surveys out at their hospital, that their infectious control surveys, that our infectious control survey showed that the work that they've put in place to keep our most vulnerable population safe during this pandemic has been almost unheard of compared to the rest of the country. And I want to recognize the work that they've done. And DHS Commissioner Crittenton and Tom Rollins for the eligibility work. We have had more children become eligible for Medicaid and families become Medicaid eligible during this pandemic than we ever have before. And to be able to keep those individuals served has been a remarkable, remarkable job on their part. And Commissioner Ward from Corrections, who has done a remarkable job with his team of keeping the number of people in the correctional system pretty safe throughout this whole pandemic. And why is this important? Because we have limited resources for staff augmentation. And if they didn't keep their people safe and their staff safe, the number of staff that we would have had to support with them would have put us over the top from a financial situation. Commissioner Oliver, the same thing. Again, state agencies have done a remarkable job working under the leadership of Governor Kemp to make certain that we're providing high quality care. General Tom Cardin and his leadership. Who would have ever thought that a General Tom Cardin and his team would have become experts in infectious disease control, working with us on our long-term care facilities, working with us on healthcare data. Just last week, he and Melanie Simon from HFRD were awarded a national award for their long-term care facility dashboard, the Army Community Partnership Awards Program. Out of well over 100 awards that were applied for, 14 were recognized, and Georgia received one of those awards. And finally, I want to close with the thank yous with our partners from Jackson Healthcare Workforce Logistics, Rick Jackson, a Georgia company who said, you know, we provide staffing resources across the country, but our #1 priority is Georgia, and how can we help? Charlie Evans is a board member who's worked tirelessly with Joe Hood since really March 14th without a day off that I'm aware of, and making certain that as hospitals have requested staffing augmentation, that we figured out some way to get them some support. We are forever grateful for what they've done. Our agency is a fairly large agency. We have 5 major divisions: the Division of Medicaid Assistance Plans, the State Health Benefit Plans, Healthcare Facility Regulation, State Office of Rural Health, and Health Planning. For some of you new members, Medicaid, of course, is pretty self-explanatory. But if you're a new member and get your insurance through the state, that comes from our department, the State Health Benefit Plan. Teachers, state employees, and many of you in the General Assembly get your insurance through us. Healthcare facility regulation, that's regulatory compliance work that we do with long-term care facilities. And the State Office of Rural Health, where we are working cooperatively with Mercer University and many other stakeholders to figure out creative ways to support the rural hospital and their needs out in the rural communities. And the Office of Health Planning. Many of you know that as the Office of CON, Certification of Need. And you'll hear from some of our experts today about what we've used those various divisions for during this pandemic. I want to turn it over to Mario Ellis, our Chief of Staff, to give you a brief update on some of our COVID-related public health emergency activities that we've done. Mario, I'll turn it over to you briefly.
Could we tell them to turn to the COVID-19 slide?
And can you please turn to the COVID-19 slide, slide number 3. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Good morning, everyone. Just wanted to start off, thank you, Commissioner, first of all, giving me this space. Talk to you all about some of the work that the agency has done. As everyone had to do immediately last March, we had to pivot very quickly and ensure first that our team was okay. And the commissioner constantly talks about the 4 tenets of customer service, communication, teamwork, and accountability. And we had to find ways, and very creative ways,
in order to ensure that our team still felt like part of a team, even though we were dispersed to our homes and had to continue to do the work that we needed to do. And so from our IT department to our HR department, still bringing on new employees who were joining our force, we just extend our thanks to them for all of the work that they did in order to ensure that the department continued to run smoothly. As we faced, some of the support that we needed to give, not only internally, but externally last March, many of our team members put in quite a few long hours and still do in order to ensure that certain services continue to be maintained. And as Commissioner mentioned earlier, one of those is our staffing augmentation service. We work closely with Healthcare Workforce Logistics, who has been a very, very responsive partner in helping us to ensure that staffing is placed, particularly nursing staff, is placed at various hospitals and nursing homes across the state. We are continuing to follow our budget closely as far as the dollars that are funding this effort and ensuring that we are responsive to our hospitals who are in greatest need, as well as our nursing facilities. And we're hoping, for a turnaround this year. It will be a blessing not to have to provide staffing, because we know we'll be on the positive end of COVID. So we're hoping for that, but we are grateful for the work that our partner in Healthcare Workforce Logistics has done to help us to continue to meet the needs of our hospitals and nursing facilities. Also, from an executive order that the governor issued back in, I think it was March or April, concerning certificate of need, it was an opportunity for healthcare facilities to apply for a suspension of the certificate of need rules in order to meet the needs of their patients and constituents. And so we've had a number of hospitals apply for suspensions in order to be able to expand their bed capacity without having to file for application. So that help has been really, really instrumental in ensuring that the least thing that a hospital would have to worry about is whether or not they can be able to place patients who come to their doors. Our department has also provided support through contracting work and to ensure that the work at the Georgia World Congress Center was established. Our legal team really helped with ensuring that the state reached terms it could be established as an alternate care site. And so that facility, of course, temporarily was put on hold as we saw a decrease in some of the numbers over the early fall, but it is reopened right now and it is working at capacity. We are really grateful, and the hospitals are grateful to have that venue as an opportunity to help treat low acuity patients. And lastly, one of the things that we also supported within Medicaid and Peach Care for Kids is to ensure that our constituents could also access healthcare via telehealth, relaxing some of those policies that would create barriers for healthcare for our children in particular. And we know that there are certain services that they have to go into the doctor's office for, like immunizations and other wear care visits. But as COVID continued to peak, it was a great opportunity for hospitals and healthcare providers to be able to keep in touch with their patients in order to ensure that their treatment needs were met. So those are just some of the things that our agency was involved in and will continue to be involved in as we continue to face some of the COVID peaks, another COVID peak that we're going through right now. And so really appreciate all the work that our agency continues to do to provide support to the state of Georgia. And we thank the governor's office also for their support in these efforts. Thank you, Commissioner. I turn it back over to you.
Thank you. And if we can go to slide number 4, please. And I know everybody is interested in an update on the Georgia pathways, and we have Blake Fullenwider, who is here to give us an update on that.
Great, thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Chairman and members of the General Assembly. I'll be very brief, but want to provide a update on a major initiative, as you're aware of, the Patients First Act. That thanks to your approval in 2019, the department has received federal approval of both our 1115 Georgia Pathways waiver as well as the Georgia Access 1332 waiver. These are two transformative waivers that will go a long way to improving health care and health coverage in this state. The 1115 waiver was approved on October 15th, 2020, and shortly thereafter on November 1st, the 1332 waiver was approved. The 1115 Georgia Pathways waiver more directly impacts DCH, where the Georgia Access waiver is focused on commercial individual market insurance company coverage. We're playing a role in that implementation, but I'll speak first to the Georgia Pathways waiver. We are on track and working in conjunction with a number of state agencies and teams through multifunctional work groups. I want to thank our partners at DFACS and the Office of Georgia Gateway for all of the work that is taking place and has been taking place since last fall to ready our systems to begin with core functionality. And we are on track for a July 1st implementation of that. That will then move us into phase 2 implementation, where we'll begin to roll in the premium assistance program for those who have an offer of employer-sponsored insurance available to them for a January 1st, 22 implementation, and then followed with phase 3 for a July 1st, 2022 implementation of the member rewards account program, which is intended to build incentives for Pathways participants to be active consumers and engaged in their own health care. On the Georgia Access waiver side, we are also working in tandem with our partners in the Governor's Office, OPB, and Ryan Loke with the Office of Health Strategy and Coordination through that work. The Office of Georgia Gateway is also involved, the Office of the Commissioner of Insurance, General King and his team, as well as the private sector, including web brokers, independent brokers, and carriers, as we begin the rate filing process and to attract them to become active participants in the Georgia Access program. That is slated for reinsurance, which is the first component to go live on January 1st, 2022, followed by the Georgia Access program, which is set for go live on January 1st, 2023. We have a significant amount of work left to do as we proceed through our implementation. In just a couple of months in July. Thank you,
Blake, there you go.
Thank you, Blake. We have a high-level amended 21 budget highlights that Lisa Walker will go over, and then we can answer as many questions as you all would like to offer, if that's an acceptable approach. Mr. Chairman, is that okay with you?
Of course, go ahead.
Great. Lisa, turn it over to you for the budget numbers. Thank you.
Well, good morning. I'll be presenting an overview of the amended year 2021 and fiscal year 2022 budget for Department of Community Health. Most of the items you see are our traditional items in terms of growth and federal mandates that we have to implement to continue to operate the Medicaid program. One exception would be the nursing home piece, and I can go over that after the presentation of the regular items. And those nursing home pieces are related to the healthcare facility regulation program. The first item is our benefits growth. We have a reduction of $26 million $872,364, and that's spread across our benefits program, which will include the Age Blind and Disabled program, the Low Income Medicaid program, and the Peach Care program. So the number you see is a summary across all of those programs, with the reduction actually being in Age Blind and Disabled program, and there is growth within a Low Income Medicaid and increase in Peach Care for children. The enhanced FMAP, that's a reduction in terms of the savings generated through the enhanced FMAP related to the CARES Act. And that enhanced FMAP gave us an enhancement of 6.2% on our federal reimbursement. So that results in a reduction in our state share that would match that federal percentage. Medicare Part B premiums, that is actually an increase in our Part B premiums for dual eligibles, in which Medicaid pay a portion of the premiums on behalf of the dual eligibles. So that's an increase of $1.2 million related to that particular item. Medicare Part D is a reduction, and that Medicare Part D is what Medicaid program pay on behalf of the dual eligibles in terms of the prescription program. And the reduction came as a result of the enhanced FMAP also. So the enhanced FMAP allowed us to reduce the state share that's usually matches the federal percentage. The next item is an item related to healthcare facility regulation. CMS early in the spring issued a mandate that the infection surveys need to be addressed, and we had to address them by a certain time frame and a certain period. And the $2.4 million you see as it relates to that nursing home survey mandate is a transfer out of the Age Blind and Disabled program, and that's only in our amended year to address those infection surveys. The next item is the nursing home survey contracts. And that's $4.8 million as it relates to the nursing home survey contracts. This is a portion of a plan that we had submitted to OPB during the early part of the fall to address some of the healthcare facility regulation problems in our survey work. And this is the contract portion that was part of a larger proposal that we had submitted to OPB. And the amount is $4.8 million. Next slide. The next items are for our fiscal year 2022 budget ask. And you'll see some of the same items within fiscal year 2022 as you saw in the amended year. In fiscal year 2022, you see growth as it relates to our benefits program. And the growth you see as it relates to our benefits program is the $64.2 million, and that's also spread across program, and that's actually an increase across program as it relates to the uptick in enrollment in the benefits programs. The enhanced FMAP is the enhanced FMAP, and that's restoration of the enhanced FMAP that we received due to the CARES Act, and that's restoring the state dollars to implement the normal FMAP, where the enhanced FMAP will go away come July 1. The Patients First Act benefits is 65.4, with the implementation of Patients First beginning July 1 of the 2022 fiscal year to 65.5 million is the amount needed to start with the benefits program as it relates to Patients First benefits. Patients First Act admin, those are admin dollars in terms of the need the Department of Community Health will need in terms of admin that will address staffing and some of the oversight and evaluation of the Patients First implementation. And the ask for that is $2.6 million. Medicare Part B premiums, once again, that's for the dual eligibles and our assistance in their premiums, and the ask is $6.3 million in terms of Part B premiums, and Medicare Part D in terms of the prescription assistance that we support the dual eligibles on, and that's $6.5 million ask as it relates to Part D clawback. The nursing home survey contracts, as I mentioned previously during the amended fiscal year, the 4.8 is the amount of a larger proposal that we had submitted to OPB to address some of the concerns within the healthcare facility regulation program. But the amount in the governor's report is 4.8 million, and that will assist in the contractual services for the vendors that help us with backlog. The next slide is slide 9. Is to give us an overview of state health benefit program. Next slide, please. Yeah, thank you. This is an overview of the financial position of the state health benefit plan in terms of how we finished fiscal year 2021 and how we project on finishing 2021 and 2022 and 2023. As you can see in the net surplus deficit in terms of fiscal year 2020, which we just finished, we ended with a surplus of $228 million in state health benefit plan. And some of that savings was available due to the decrease in utilization within state health benefit plan. And as we go toward fiscal year 2021, the current year we're in, you'll see that we're trending toward a deficit. And usually in the state health benefit plan, most of the revenue that comes in that program is supported with premiums. In this past fiscal year, there was a slight increase in employee premiums to help assist with that revenue. But the biggest revenue generator is the employer share that goes to agencies that they pay on behalf of the employees. So that hasn't been adjusted in a while, and that is leading to revenue not keeping pace with the expenditures in the program. The prior year fund balance that you see on the current audited year and the projected years, that's a combination of reserve funds for OPEB and SHBP reserves. And as we move into 2021 and 22, we will have to utilize some of the SHBP reserves to maintain current operations in the state health benefit plan, as it relates to making sure it stays solvent in terms of operations. And that concludes the presentation on our position on financial, SHBP financial status and our budget presentation.
Mr. Chairman,
Thank
we'll
you so
turn
much.
it back over to you for any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Commissioner. We do have quite a few questions. The first comes from Dr. Senator Burke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You left out secretary and chairman and gosh.
Leader of the free world. There's a lot of titles there, Senator.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank the commissioner and his staff for the work that they've done during the pandemic, and the staffing support that he mentioned was extremely important to Southwest Georgia. You know, I think Albany and Phoebe kind of bared the brunt of this pandemic that first month, and the support that you guys gave from a staffing and National Guard infection control, I truly do think saved a lot of lives, and I want to thank you guys for the partnership. As far as a question, I know we put some money in the budget last year to help support the rural hospitals that were having severe financial distress, and one of those was a process to implement strike teams to go out and help try to figure out what we could do as a state to decrease the amount of support that they needed to make sure they were financially viable. And again, I think this pandemic has shown the importance of having those institutions available, because all of our tertiary health centers have been full, and those hospitals have played a great role in keeping people healthy. So the need for them, I think, has been validated, and now we just need to figure out the best way to support them. So could you give us an update on that process?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much for the question. And again, thank you for all of your support. The reach out has not gone unrecognized, and it's greatly appreciated. On the strike force, so originally we had a plan of putting together a strike team and literally showing up at hospitals and working with that hospital to determine a level of need. Certainly COVID has impacted that pretty significantly. So we have partnered with Dr. Sumner and her team at Mercer and our State Office of Rural Health to come up with a very, very comprehensive survey tool that will be giving and has already begun to be given to some of the hospitals that are in urgent need. I'll ask Lisa and double check. She's actually sitting to my right. I know that we're on 2 cameras, but she's sitting to my right with the expectation and hope that we will begin to roll out dollars to those that are most in need within, hopefully by March, mid-March maybe, with the initial dollars going out around that time. We understand the urgency. We continue to refine that survey tool with Dr. Sumner and the strike force team. But we're thinking, again, very positively that the hospital should be receiving some of those emergency dollars pretty soon.
I have a couple of other questions. Chairman England.
Good morning, Commissioner and Ms. Lisa. Good to see y'all. And to Dr. Burke, if you want to circle up in just a little bit too, I'm glad to give you a little bit of an update. I had a conversation last night on that as well, on the rural hospital work. We've got several online questions. One of those coming from Representative Al Williams, just asking what do you feel that's been the biggest problem in getting shots in arms on the vaccines, of course, and what do y'all see as a way to help kind of turn that around as well? I know Dr. Toomey yesterday had mentioned several things that they were working on, and we still have the issue of delivery of getting enough here, but just wanted to kind of get your take on that too.
Thank you. So that is certainly a great question. I know a lot of people are wondering about that. Public health is doing a remarkable job of continuing to push that it's a safe vaccine, that it's going to be available. The governor has made this a top priority. I think in every press conference, he has said that he wants a more innovative approach, and Dr. Toomey has been responding with innovative approaches. Where our department plays a role in this is certainly with long-term care facilities and making certain that they have the needed tools that are available for them to be able to administer the vaccine as quickly as possible, whether that's in-house pharmacy or working with Walgreens or CVS. What we will continue to do is encourage that. Our department does not play a hands-on role with the administration of the vaccine, but what we do is play a critical role in communicating its safety. We can certainly play a role in the public service campaigns that are going on. And again, as I mentioned earlier today, anything that Dr. Toomey needs from us, we stand ready. Again, people have this perception about state government. Dr. Toomey and I can speak sometimes as many as 3 and 4 times a day. If they need us to play a different role or a larger role or whatever role that she determines is appropriate, working with the governor, we stand ready to do that. But again, our focus would be on long-term care facilities and supporting that. I have heard that, we're slowly increasing the percentage of healthcare workers who get the vaccine. I think we started with about 30% and we're getting upwards to 40 and 50%. So the more we can encourage people to get the vaccine in the healthcare workforce, the better off we'll be. I hope that's an okay answer. And if we need to talk further offline, we certainly can.
All right. Our next question is, Commissioner, have you considered using home and community-based providers to get our most vulnerable elderly population with nursing home levels of care vaccinated quickly? These individuals have difficulty in getting out in the community to get vaccinated. These HCBS providers are already sending nursing staff into these homes and can help educate on the need for the vaccine for COVID.
Yes, we have had a brief discussion on that and would welcome the opportunity to have further discussion. I believe I know where that question is coming from, and we would welcome further discussion with that. I think we're looking at all available healthcare workers who have an interest or would be willing to go into whether that's hospital settings or long-term care facilities or home settings where we have some of the most vulnerable youth, we would absolutely be willing and to entertain further conversations. And Chairman, if there's an opportunity again for us to have further discussion about how that would work, we'll get something scheduled. Brandy can reach out immediately and get something on the books even as quickly as today.
Commissioner, we have a couple of questions. As you know, during the summer, psychiatric residential treatment facilities has been a big priority of the Senate. Can you tell us where we are in that project moving forward and possibly able to create some help for those citizens who would benefit from some of those programs?
Yeah, great. And again, thank you for the question. You know, it's a fascinating discussion to be engaged with, and I want to certainly recognize the work that Tom Rollins and our departments both are doing as it relates to therapeutic foster care. Going back specifically to PRTFs, you know, I've been in Georgia since 1995. I was here 4 years before Olmstead was signed, and have been working with children and families in the community really since 1995. And I think the pendulum swings, and most people are familiar with this. I remember about 10 to 12 years ago, the movement of we've got to do everything we can to get children out of PRTFs. We're overusing that service. And so there was a big push to bring our children home, and to bring children home from out-of-home placements, and to bring children home from PRTFs. And now what we're hearing is the denial rate of children trying to get into PRTFs is too great. And we've got to look at that. So we've been partnering with the Voices for Georgia's Children, who are just a remarkable organization, with Erica Sitkoff and Mario Ellis, our chief of staff, along with other key stakeholders, to look at the data. What is the data showing us as it relates to children in need of that level of care? Are there denials inappropriate? We're willing, partnering with them, to open the books of what the data looks like. We've engaged with the care management organizations to look at the protocols, to look at medical necessity, to come up with an agreed upon criteria. And so the work continues and it's ongoing. The work really didn't slow down over the summer, COVID or no COVID. The work continued. And so we're hopeful that we will come up with an agreed upon approach to serving children, whether that's in PRTFs or whether that's in therapeutic foster care, or whether that's in other community-based services. But the CMOs are at the table with us. The providers are at the table with us. The advocacy organizations are at the table with us, and we're looking forward to the ongoing work. And again, the work that us and DFACS under Tom's leadership and under Commissioner Fitzgerald's leadership of looking at what the comprehensive needs of these children indicate. Once we all have put our heads together, I think we're making tremendous progress. I know it's not quick enough. And I, again, have been around a long time. I get frustrated with the slowness, but we're taking bites of the apple, and we should continue to move forward with that.
The next question is about the state health benefit plan. Can you tell us for how long that contract is, it looks like how long that contract lasts, and then when is it next up for reconsideration or rebid?
Yeah, Lisa, you want to talk about the contract? I think that we'll tag team this one a little bit. The contracts don't have an end date per se. There's no set time for them to expire. We've done some renewals. We're working on really the bigger issue than anything is, what is it that we want from our state health benefit plan partners to be providing for us? And so we're working both with the Board of Regents, we're working with the governor's office to, and we're working with many members that are in the audience today in your room to talk about what health outcomes do we want Georgia to be focused on, and what are the best plans to be able to deliver those health outcomes. And so there's no set time for them to expire. We have renewed them. And SHBP is a little bit different than most of our other contracts, where we have the ability to continue on until otherwise directed or otherwise indicated that we're ready to go in a different direction. Not necessarily with our partners, but open it up for a competitive bid process and then determine what it is we want to purchase. We're now looking really concretely at what are the services, what is the comprehensive approach that we want to purchase, and not necessarily what is it that somebody is trying to sell us. Lisa, did I miss anything from?
You covered it, Commissioner.
Okay.
And the last question that I have on my side is from Senator Sims. She's asking, could you please explain the comment about the CON relaxation during the COVID period?
Yes, thank you, Senator Sims, for the question. So one of the early challenges that we were faced with, and this goes again back to Governor Kemp asking for every tool available to help with hospital bed capacity and things like that. One of the things that we recognized was that if a hospital was only licensed or had a certification of need for a certain number of beds, but had the ability either through empty space or a closed unit to be able to offer more beds that were COVID-specific treatment opportunities, that we could waive or relax a CON rule so that they would be able to do that without going through the formal CON process. One of the key factors that went into that executive order, though, however, was that 90 days after the public health emergency is declared over, that then they revert back to their previous CON capacity. So it was a way to free up bed space so that those hospitals who had the opportunity to grow bed capacity would be able to without going through the cumbersome process of the CON certificate of need process.
That brings us to another one from Chairman Hatchett, and just kind of it echoes off of what you just asked, but with the suspension in place, have we seen any detrimental impacts? I know, that's a very hot topic, and we constantly have a battle, it seems, over it, and folks with different points of view and different opinions on it. But in what has been done to this point, do we see anything that has occurred that, is going to cause permanent harm?
Chairman Hatchett, thank you for the question. So remember, this has been solely focused on COVID-related activities. So the CON suspensions have been focused on COVID. So to this point, we have seen absolutely no detrimental effects from the relaxation of CON as it has related to the COVID-specific increase in bed capacity or other opportunities that CON has been able to relax.
Senator Lucas, if you want to grab the mic.
Dr. Berry, where are we as far as the rural hospitals and them asking for advanced dish monies? And I'm asking because last year we tried to help alleviate a situation that we were all caught in prior to the pandemic really hitting us. But how many of these rural hospitals have already asked for advanced dish so that we have some idea when we're dealing with the appropriations process of where we are with these rural hospitals?
Thank you, Senator. Lisa, do you have a current request update on advance?
Sure. There has been no hospital asking for advanced dish payments. And that is because usually during the month between December and January, we send out interim dish payments, and we usually true them up with more accurate information that we receive by the time I would say May or June comes, and we do adjustments then and send out the final dish payment. But we usually send out interim dish payments between December and January. So there has been no hospital requesting an advanced dish payment.
Got a couple of questions online.
Okay, this from Senator Orrock, and kind of a two-part question a little bit. Regarding our state's high maternal mortality rates, please update us on the progress in extending Medicaid in the postpartum period for up to 6 months, and how much would it cost to extend the coverage for the full year? And then what steps does DCH take to ensure that women are aware that they have continued access to medical care up to 6 months after delivery? And I'll just put a footnote here because Senator may not be aware, but during the public health state of emergency, federally declared public health state of emergency, that if a lady gives birth during this period of time, they have to stay on Medicaid. So we've not had a chance really to kind of stand up the state program yet, but let y'all give an update.
Great, and I'll ask Blake to give an update. Blake, if you would mind.
Certainly, thank you very much for the question. So DCH has submitted the request to CMS, which is an 1115 waiver application to extend from 2 months to 6 months for postpartum coverage. The negotiation period, which occurs with every 1115, was kicked off last week. So we are in active discussion with CMS. They're aware of the request, and we're hopeful that those discussions will move pretty quickly. From a technical standpoint, the policy in the 1115 waiver is fairly straightforward. It's really one policy change, which is just moving from 2 months to 6 months. Where in comparison, if you looked at the Patients First Act, which was also in 1115, there were many different policy elements that needed to be discussed. One area that I know that we'll focus on with our federal partners is the budget neutrality, working with our actuaries to be sure that our projections are correct. So that'll be part of the discussion. We're hopeful, though, that this can move very quickly. And once that obviously is approved, then we'll move to implement as rapidly as possible. I will say on an implementation side, we have already begun working with our vendors, Gainwell Technologies, for instance, who runs our Medicaid management information system, to go ahead and begin laying the groundwork for that implementation to occur. So we can flip that on relatively quickly rather than starting after federal approval. Going to your second part of your question in terms of how are we going to make sure that women who have given birth are aware, there really won't be anything that a postpartum woman will need to do, whereas their coverage would, notwithstanding any other action that they take, would end after 60 days postpartum. It will automatically extend to 6 months. We are looking to and working with the advocate community there's a lot of interest in this, so we'll be working with them to help get the word out, provider associations, and would certainly appreciate help from members of the General Assembly as well as you may get questions.
Okay, thank you, Blake. Next one is from Dr. Lee Hawkins to Commissioner. Thank you for the staffing assistance to the North Georgia Health Systems, and I would echo that. I'm sure that Pro Tem Miller would echo that as well as Representative Donahue and many of us in that neck of the woods up there. It was truly a lifesaver. Do you see a continued supply of healthcare staff for the future and until we get on to the downside of COVID?
So as of right now, we have funding that carries us through March 6th. We will continue to work to push as hard as we can for continuation. I think there is a little bit of some promise that the federal government will come through with more dollars and that we would continue that. I know that it has been absolutely one of the most critical pieces from what we've heard from hospitals who it's not just a matter of the volume of patients that they're serving, it's a matter of the number of team members, nurses, doctors, respiratory therapists that have been impacted by COVID themselves who have been out. So it's a staffing shortage, and in addition to the increased numbers. So Joe Hood has done a remarkable job of coordinating with hospitals across the state. We believe, and I believe that the governor's team believes, that this has been one of the most valuable tools that we've been using to fight COVID. And we're very, very hopeful that the feds will give us ongoing support to continue that. We certainly see the value in it, and we'll continue to push as hard as we can.
Thank you, Commissioner. That's all the questions you had online and all the questions you have in the audience. We appreciate your presentation today. Thank you for your team members who presented as well. And thanks for the work you're making during the pandemic and also on other matters related to public health, particularly infant and maternal mortality that we know you've worked with this body to address for many years.
Thank you very much.
Members, we're about 10 minutes ahead of schedule. We're going to take a quick break and we will start back at 9:59. Commissioner, if you may be muted. We haven't heard you yet.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I couldn't hear you either. I apologize. Good morning. Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Good morning. Yes, ma'am. We hear you and the floor is yours.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you, Chairman Tillery, Chairman England, and all the members who are here this morning. I appreciate the opportunity to discuss the budget for the Georgia Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Disabilities. It's great to be with you in the way that we are together in 2021. And just as we get started, I do want to offer a note of gratitude, first to both of you who I've spoken with during the pandemic, and also really to members and the House and Senate budget offices and all of the staff who have been working so tirelessly. Of course, I know about my staff, but really the cooperation and the collaboration has only been possible because of the incredible hard work across the board. So I want to thank your teams and of course, Governor Kemp and his team. The back and forth required and the conversation with our partners at OPB has been very robust, and we have really felt supported throughout this really challenging time. The virtual environment certainly has brought both opportunities and challenges, but really we sit today in gratitude for the partnership that we feel with all of our partners across the state. So really want to start with that note. Okay, with that, next slide, please. Okay, and I think we can go to the first slide. Okay, just wanted to share with you all what I plan to cover in our conversation this morning. I do plan to give you all an agency overview, remind you of what DBHDD does and who we serve. I also want to provide an update on the ADA settlement and of course on the impact of COVID-19. I will provide a budget summary and then move into the governor's budget report, and then also touch on our capital budget, and hope we'll have the opportunity to talk about future opportunities and challenges. So that's the plan for my presentation. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is a very simple description of our agency overview. And I'm actually, with your permission, going to spend a little more time than I normally do in just describing very specifically who we are and who we serve. One of the reasons I want to do this is in acknowledgement of new members to the General Assembly. I also recognize there's been so much increased interest in mental health and behavioral health and on the impact of COVID for people with disabilities. So I want to make sure we're being very clear about who we are and what we do with your support. So very critical to inform you that DBHDD serves as the public safety net in Georgia. And we deliver services for individuals with mental illness, substance use disorders, and intellectual and developmental disabilities. And I'm going to take a moment and describe each of those areas because it's complex, but we've learned so much in past decades. So want to make sure people understand the nuances in each of these areas. So when I use the term mental illness, what I'm talking about there are individuals whose diseases and illness involve conditions that impact their thinking, their emotion, and their behavior. And it occurs for them to a degree that it impacts their functioning in school or at work or at home or at life in the community. So just to be clear, those are illnesses like depression, like anxiety, schizophrenia, or post-traumatic stress disorder. All of those are examples of mental illness. When I use the term substance use disorder, what I'm talking about there is individuals who have a recurrent use of alcohol or drugs, whether they're legal or not, and that use of those substances, again, impacts their ability to function in work and in life. And then finally, individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities refer to, and those are actually two different disability areas. So when I use the term intellectual disabilities, we're talking about individuals who, from before they were age 18, have challenges with their mental capacity and their ability to partake in daily activities of living. For people with developmental disabilities, those might be intellectual disabilities. They might also include physical disabilities, which are chronic and enduring. And in all of those cases, they might impact an individual's ability to learn or use language or participate in social interactions. So understanding all of those disabilities is important because of the nuances between them and because the services that provide relief for those individuals are financed differently and they're provided differently across our vast network. So really wanted to spend a little time and make sure that I describe those terms. So there's one other term that I'll use again, just to be as clear as we can and not use acronyms. The term behavioral health is a term that's used across the country when we're talking about both mental illness and substance use together. So sometimes those are called co-occurring disorders if they appear in an individual, but together when we reference behavioral health, we mean together mental illness and substance use. Okay, so that's just an explanation of the individuals and the diseases and challenges that they might be facing. For DBHDD, to be clear, our priority population is the individuals who are most in need and then who are uninsured, underinsured, or who are receiving public benefits such as Medicaid. Very important to understand that for all of those diseases I mentioned, they might be less severe or more severe. Our priority population is for the individuals who are most in need. So just to give you a sense of the scope of individuals facing these challenges at the highest level of need in this state. In fiscal year 2020, DBHDD served over 212,000 unique individuals in these different disability areas. And how do we do that? We do it through our network of 5 state hospitals around the state, and we have a network of over 700 community-based providers. Some of those are small, might be an individual group home. Some of those are large. It could be a day services program or an outpatient clinic where hundreds of people are served. So again, just a snapshot of the complexity of our service delivery system and the people that we serve. And one of the reasons it's just important to describe all of this is to really understand this. These conditions are treatable. And when we can identify individuals with these conditions and provide appropriate resources and supports and treatment, these individuals are able to thrive in the community. We do believe that independence and recovery are possible, and that is the work of our department and our contracted providers. Next slide. Okay, so what I'm going to do quickly here is provide you 2 different snapshots of DBHDD's budget. And the reason for doing this is not at all to absorb these many numbers that are here on the page, but just to show you two important things. First is that we're dividing here, we're showing you the state and the federal funds, which support the work that we do. So you can see that division there. More importantly on this slide, we wanted to show you all the different program areas within our service delivery system. So you see how it's divided by program area. So adult addictive. So that means the funds we're using to support adults with substance use disorders. As you go down in each of those program areas, that C&A, that stands for child and adolescent. And again, you'll see a repeat of some of the same program areas, but it's a different program for different age groups. So wanted you to see that we're serving individuals across the lifespan. And I know some of you have interest in particular areas of our program. So I wanted you to see that slice of the budget. Next slide, please. Okay, on this slice of the budget, again, same budget. This is our FY 2021 appropriation. You see our total, the DBHDD total amount. You can see it over there on the right. It might be buried, but that 1.3 billion. Again, we're showing you the distinction between state funding and federal funding. But now we've simplified all those different program areas, and we've entitled them either community or hospital. And this is a really important distinction. We have our 5 state hospitals, but over the last decade, we've made really important strides in building up our community services. I also wanted to show you our administration line. It's really important to DBHDD. We embrace the call for lean government. Our administration of these programs and services is a really limited portion of our budget, around 3%, as you can see there. So again, just a big snapshot of who we are and what we do in service of our individuals. Next slide, please. Okay, so 2 really important drivers of our work in the past year and always. So I want to talk a little bit about the impact on our operations. First, for the ADA settlement agreement, and then COVID-19. So next slide, please. All right, we'll talk about the ADA settlement agreement extension. So again, a little bit of table setting here. Just to clarify, the ADA stands for the Americans with Disabilities Act. And the state is in a settlement agreement with the United States Department of Justice. As you can see here, the beginning of that settlement agreement was October 2010. So what happened in our state was that in around 2009, it was alleged that the state had an over-reliance on institutional care, basically saying that people were using our hospitals because we did not have enough community-based services. And the allegation was that was true for people both with mental illness, as I've described, or people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. The state acknowledged that we had work to do, and that's when we signed the settlement agreement in 2010. Since that time, we have had a dramatic buildup of community-based services. You all have been incredibly generous and committed in your support for waivers and crisis services and a complete and full continuum of service for people at the highest level of need. What this allowed us to do was close hospitals and really have a robust continuum in the community. I do want to make a note that at the time, before the time that we signed the settlement agreement, we acknowledged that we would no longer allow children and youth to be served in our state hospitals for these conditions. And in addition, we also said individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities should no longer be served in the hospital. So since that time, October 2010, we have really had a dramatic pivot to all the services that really allow people to live a life in the community. So year over year, the state has been making investments. Our continuum has become far more robust. And we got back to the table with the Department of Justice in 2016. At that time, they acknowledged the remarkable progress that Georgia had made, but they acknowledged a few areas where they did not believe that we had evidence of compliance. So you see in bullet number 2, the articulation of the small handful of important things that we continue to work on and the feds continue to monitor us on. That is continuing the use of now and comp waiver services. So let me explain a note here. Waivers are our federal state partnership that allow individuals, they waive using the institution to live in the community. And you all have supported the investment in waivers, 2 waiver programs for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, allow us to move people either from hospital settings or from a planning list that we have where we identify people with needs and we move them into community-based settings. The federal government continues to challenge us to expand our services and our waiver availability in the community. Once those individuals are in the community, and many of these are individuals with very complex health needs, our oversight and our surveillance of those individuals, the feds continue to monitor all our processes for how we do that, how we identify and respond in real time to the over 13,000 individuals that are living in community settings receiving a waiver. In addition, we've made really significant contributions to our crisis system. What we find is that system is still challenged by ongoing demand. So, and for individuals who have special needs that can't always be met even in a traditional crisis setting. So we continue to expand and enhance our crisis services. And then finally, the final element that is under the scrutiny of the Department of Justice is our Georgia Housing Voucher Program. This is specifically a unique and innovative and recognized as, we are recognized as a leader in the country in our housing voucher program, which allows individuals with serious mental illness to live in an independent arrangement. And what we're providing is the supports and services that allow them to assist them with their functioning and their ability to live independently. That voucher program is very successful. We need to keep building the services and supports that allow people to stay in the community. So the status update I can give you quickly today, we continue to make progress in each of these areas. We collect extensive evidence of our progress. Given the change in administration in Washington, we anticipate that in the next few months, we may have a better eye towards what a new Department of Justice plans to do regarding this settlement agreement. We're really proud of the progress that we've made. Next slide, please. Okay. Here's my best picture of the evidence of the progress that we've made. So again, this is another snapshot of our budget. The purpose for showing you this is not to have you track those individual numbers. I know the writing's small. I want you to know that the yellow line is community and the red line is hospital. And the starting point at this slide is 2010. And the high point, the end point of the chart here is 2021. What this shows is the state of Georgia meeting the intent of the settlement agreement, right? The intent was build up your community services. While at the same time, and I really do want to know this, it's critical that we still maintain hospital quality and safety. So you see generally a solid line along the bottom demonstrating our commitment to high quality hospital care, but a real ramp up of what's available in the community for people with all the disability areas that we serve. Thank you. Next slide. Okay, so now I want to take some time and talk a little bit about the impact of COVID-19 on our system as a whole. And it is really important, I think, to state right at the outset. There is no aspect of health and human services that has been untouched by the pandemic. Very specifically, for DBHDD and all of the disability areas, the individuals we serve, the providers who serve them, the staff, and really the network that represents the total capacity. Every impact of our service delivery system has been dramatically changed very rapidly as a result of COVID. It has changed the way people receive their services and the way providers deliver these services. And I want to remind you about that provider network that we have, those 700 providers that I mentioned. All around the state, in every corner of the state, we have providers endeavoring to serve individuals in our disability areas. All of those providers, large and small, are business owners. They are trying to maintain a business, and they're in the business of service delivery. Many of them are small business providers. So the challenges you heard across the board for small businesses throughout the pandemic, those were the same challenges that our provider network experienced. Really important to understand that. So when I talk about what happened for the individuals we serve and for our providers, I think maybe it would be helpful for you to think about your own healthcare experience during the pandemic as I think about mine, because many things probably changed in what you could do, how you might access services. So really easier examples are you might have had the opportunity to pivot to telehealth. You might have had a doctor or a provider that had the capacity to do that. That was really a big part of our network's pivot as well, very rapidly. Folks were tooled to do that, but not quite ready to do that at full speed for all the people that they serve. But that's what they really navigated the ability to do, and they needed support in order to do that. For many of us, we also delayed care that we needed. That was another big challenge facing the people that we serve. And I think you heard when I was talking in that first slide, we're serving the most in need individuals that have very complex illnesses and disorders that involve, for people with mental illness, their understanding of the world. And so the pandemic was a really challenging time for people with illnesses and for people with disabilities. So I really just want to acknowledge the challenges. Very critically, we had some important areas of our work that were very specifically impacted. And I really want to just describe those a little bit so y'all understand what the impact was like operationally. So our crisis capacity. In Georgia, we have a very robust crisis continuum. We have a 24/7 GCAL, that's our call-in crisis line, 24/7, that stayed in existence throughout the pandemic. And we have mobile crisis. Those are literally what you think. They're mobile teams that can go out in the community. Obviously, they had to rethink their ability to go to a home or to be present physically. We have crisis units where individuals who are in psychiatric crisis can be dropped off to be stabilized for us to understand what their needs are. Across that crisis system, the ability to travel freely and for staff to stay healthy was very compromised. The ability to access PPE testing and keep all of our staff safe while addressing the needs of the safety net individuals was really critical for us. Group services is another important element of our service delivery system. So many of the people that we serve, whether they have mental illness or substance use disorder or intellectual and developmental disabilities, their evidence-based treatment occurs in a group setting. As soon as the pandemic hit, not only sometimes could people not get individual in-person services, there certainly was not an ability to receive group services. So the individuals were compromised, but really importantly, the staff and the providers who served them, they couldn't provide those group services, so their business is compromised. So our work was to say, what can we do to support them? Because that third bullet is really critical. The provider network that we have are individuals and businesses and organizations that are deeply committed to the people that we serve. The stability of that network is vital to DBHDD, and the safety net is vital to the state. So knowing that there will be an end to the pandemic, but saying, how can we assure that these providers will be there as folks come back into doing in-person services? So really thinking about ways that we might be able to address the needs of the providers really became an important priority for us. I want to spend a minute to also make sure I've mentioned our 5 state hospitals at DBHDD, and I really want to stress the importance of the staffing challenges that we experienced. Right at the moment COVID hit, we experienced what hospitals all around the state found, which was that it was very easy for COVID to come into your hospital, and it was not easy to manage it once it was in the hospital. How did it come in? It might have been a patient. Also, our staffs are people who live in the local community. So when a local community became infected, unbeknownst sometimes to a staff person, when they weren't yet symptomatic, they came in to our hospital, and what we found very quickly was that we had to make dramatic changes to make sure that we could do quarantine and isolation, send staff home if it was not appropriate to work, and most importantly, protect the patients that we serve. This was a Herculean effort, and when we acknowledge healthcare heroes, I really just want to say we had many of those at our state employees in our state hospitals. So next slide. Okay, so what I want to tell you about really is the solutions, because many activities kicked into gear, and I'm so proud of the partnerships and the work that enabled us to keep doing what is our #1 priority, keep the doors of the safety net open. So what you see in this first item is a number of descriptions of the activities that we had to very quickly work on in order to keep the doors open to service delivery. That meant ensuring that crisis services were still accessible and available. In many cases, we had to very quickly modify service requirements, give us flexibility to allow and to provide fiscal support to providers who were saying, we want to serve, but we can't. How do we stay in business? So we have to acknowledge the support from the federal government. I want to acknowledge our partners at DCH. And I really want to thank the governor's office and the support, very specifically Ryan Loke, Commissioner Berry at DCH. When they were looking at the hospital needs across the state, they recognized the DBHDD hospitals and our state employees and the challenges that we were having. And we were immediately included in the Jackson Healthcare staff augmentation. I don't know how to tell you how vital this was as a lifeline for the continuation of the safety net. These activities are current. All of them are very real and active right now, enabling individuals to still access services, even if it's in a different way, and really to ensure a partnership with our providers. This is so critical, and this is in process right now, all of these activities. So now I want to describe a little bit about the funding mechanisms at work here. So you see item #2, the state match. So, and the requirements, what happened with FMAP to enable all this flexibility that we had. So I think most folks are familiar with the fact that Medicaid is a joint federal and state program. Every year there's something called the FMAP. That's our particular state's allocation for how much Georgia has to pay into this partnership with the feds. Generally, the state portion is about 33%. What happened as a result of the public health emergency is that the feds gave a really vital lifeline to the states. And it's called an enhanced FMAP. What that allowed us to do was reduce the amount of match that the state pays so that we had extra state dollars to do all the things you see there in item #1. These enhanced FMAP dollars are time-limited dollars to help us survive the pandemic. And they really have been vital to our ability to proceed. So really can't emphasize enough how important they've been. And I'm taking the time to do this because it's an important part of our budget discussion. So next slide, please. Okay, so quick snapshot, budget summary here. Next slide. Just a reminder of the fiscal year 2021 and the budget reductions that DBHDD experienced in the amount 10%, just like everyone else, which was $123 million. But I also want you to note the enhancements there because as we did these strategic reductions, there was also recognition that there were some enhancements necessary, particularly in areas around our now and comp waivers and also really especially crisis services. This remains really vital to the well-being of individuals in the state. So you see there the net change to DBHDD's budget. I want to assure you what you see there, our goals remain the same. Whether it's the pandemic or not, we still have a strong commitment to provide services and support to individuals in communities and in our hospitals, and to do so in the most efficient and effective way that we can. Next slide, please. Okay, so now to our statewide adjustments and our agency priorities. Next slide, we'll show you the numbers here. Okay, so what you can see is that first line item, TRS adjustments. Many of you are familiar, that's teacher retirement system. Actually, that small line item just references the fact that in our partnership with Augusta University and in our some of our crisis units, we actually do have teachers as part of our network. So that's the reference there. Item number 2, that annual FMAP rate change. So that's the regular FMAP. That's the one you see in our budget every year. That's a budget neutral item. It's either up and down to help keep that budget neutral. You see that item in the 22 budget there. All these next 4 items that you see all relate to the enhanced FMAP that I was talking about, these dollars that helped us to survive COVID. So I'll kind of group them together. And really all those services you heard about, the pivot to telehealth, the ability to give providers retainers and to continue to do all kinds of innovative services, support individuals and families to stay in their home if that's where they needed to be. That's what the utilized number 3, those enhanced FMAP for services, they're for developmental disabilities and for mental health. And the backfill you see in item number 6, same thing in last year's budget, the budget reduction there. So all of those, we believe these funds are critical for us to continue to navigate the pandemic that is very real across our hospitals and communities. Item number 4, I'll take a minute to explain. I see we've got some acronyms in there. So again, it's using that enhanced FMAP to implement a feasibility study. OPB has charged us with looking a little more closely at something that we call an IDD BHC. So remember, IDD is individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. A BHCC is part of our crisis continuum, Behavioral Health Crisis Center. And what those are serving individuals with mental illness and substance use disorders. What we know is individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities also find themselves in behavioral crises. We'd like to be the first state that stands up a unique center that would be specifically devoted to this form of treatment. So OPB has asked us to look a little more closely and refine our plans for what that would look like. And item number 5, again, the enhanced FMAP, our acronyms there, Southwest State Hospital and Northwest Georgia Regional Hospital. I think I mentioned previously, we have 5 state hospitals. We have 2 that we closed. DBHDD still maintains those campuses. And the cost to maintain those campuses so that they can be considered for sale by state properties, it requires us to maintain those campuses. So the funds there, we're going to use the enhanced FMAP in order to make sure we maintain those campuses so they can be considered for purchase by private or other entities. So that's our total there. Let me move to the next slide, please. Okay, and then here's our budget request for 22. 4 items, pretty straightforward. Many of you have seen some of these before. That first line item, the now and comp waivers, these are what allow us to move individuals either from a hospital or from our planning list into community-based settings. So we're seeking 100 new waivers in 22 at a cost of, as you see there, about $2 million. The second item, annualized funding for a new 40-bed forensic unit. This is in our hospital, West Central Georgia Regional in Columbus. We have no plans to expand our hospitals except for one area where we serve forensic individuals. Those are individuals who are involved in the court system. They come to us sometimes for a period of time so that they can receive treatment and be restored to competency so they can stand trial for the crime that they have may have committed. So we're building a new unit. You all had provided operational funds to begin standing that up, and now we're analyzing that in the hopes of having that open in this fiscal year. The next item, I mentioned the Georgia Housing Voucher Program. So you all have provided funds for 2,000 individuals to be in those housing vouchers. We're not at 2,000 individuals. So what we're going to do while we continue to build, the numbers are increasing, but is to use those funds for the services and supports that enable people to live successfully in those independent settings. And then that final item are reference for staff, corrective action plan specialists. So again, this is about our partnership with our providers. Our providers all around the state serve tens of thousands of people. In that, when incidents occur of any kind, those are reported to the state, and we investigate those. If we find that a provider has deficiencies, we want to do everything we can in order to help that provider succeed in delivering services. That's what these corrective action plan specialists do. And so we're seeking funds for additional individuals to do that work. Okay, next slide. Our capital budget request for 22, please, next slide. Okay, two items here for bond requests. And really just want to make mention, again, this is about our 5 state hospitals, but really want to make the picture clear for those of you who haven't seen, our hospitals are actually campuses. Over the course of those 5 hospitals, we actually have about 470 buildings, many of which are old and in need of expected repair, some of which you see in terms of hospital sustainment bonds that might be for fixing lighting or a parking lot, and where we're referencing the 20-year bonds for major renovations, it could be that a hospital needs a new roof. So again, the quality and safety of our hospitals is vital. So we make these capital requests to preserve those facilities. Next slide. Okay, just a quick note of some of the critical challenges that we see. Some of you are familiar with all of these. Next slide, please. I'll just touch on a few of these. I want to make sure we have time to address your questions. So number one, again, you've heard repeatedly, and I know you all remain concerned about when individuals experience crisis. I want to make sure that you know that Georgia, through the result of your investments over many years, Georgia has what's nationally recognized as one of the most comprehensive and robust crisis systems. But we still need to continue to build and enhance and use our learnings to continue to make it possible for people who are in crisis to receive the services and supports that they need. Of course, we want to continue the ongoing implementation of our ADA settlement services and continue to refine those and demonstrate and our evidence of the progress that we've made. I've mentioned the planning list. You all have been familiar with this. What you know is we have about 7,000 individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities who are on our planning list that we seek to serve as we are appropriated funds to do so. I want to make just a quick comment about item number 4 in community behavioral health. We use the term core outpatient because many of you have really begun to understand our system, and you've asked the really critical question. Is there anything we could do to prevent so much need for crisis service? And the answer is yes. We need to continue to build what we call basic outpatient services so that before individuals get into crisis, they have easy access into the level and type of service that we need. So we'll continue to promote and seek ways to make it easier for people to access what they need in communities all around the state. I want to say a word about addictive disease and capacity needs there. And I do want to acknowledge the federal partnership, as many of you are well aware. For the last 3 years, we've received significant enhancements to our addictive disease service delivery system by virtue of the federal grants for opioid use disorder, which we've really expanded what we're able to do in communities all around the state, and it's been vital. And then, of course, we seek to improve our capacity for forensic services. Again, individuals who are involved with local law enforcement and the criminal justice system, we want to be sure we're partnering with all the elements of service delivery that really assist people in moving through a continuum of care. And overall, what I hope you see here is that the investments we've made are working, but we're going to continue to need to build and enhance what we do, really to address what continues to be increased demand all around the state. So let me pause. That's my final slide. And I know you may have questions. That's been a mouthful. Again, let me thank you for the opportunity. And then let me also just, as we move to questions, I want to let you know I have some teammates on the line and I just want to introduce them. So Ashley Fielding is on the line representing DBHDD. She's with us now as our Assistant Commissioner. And then I also have with me Mary Price, who is DBHDD's Chief Financial Officer, and Chris Hamilton, who's our Budget Director at DBHDD. So as you have questions, one of us will seek to be as responsive as we can. So Chairman Tillery, Chairman England, I turn it back to you.
Thank you, Commissioner. You have a couple of questions. Senator Burke, Chairman Burke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And with your permission, I may go a little long. I'm just going to warn you. You cut me off when you need to. Commissioner, first of all, thank you for the work you and your team are doing. The times we're living in is unprecedented, and the challenges on the mental health side of the healthcare continuum has increased exponentially because of that. And you know, your team has recognized that, and in addition to all the other burdens you bear, whether it's addictive diseases or the developmentally disabled that are always among us, you've been amazing, actually, in the capacity that y'all shown and the flexibility. A couple of years ago, we passed the House Bill 186. That part of it was the Health Act that developed the Office of Health Strategy and Innovation, and I want to congratulate the governor on picking a great young individual, Ryan Loke, to be in that position. And part of that charge in that act was to kind of evaluate the health agencies in the state and how they work together. And you know, even before he's hardly been settled in that position, a lot of the need for that act has disappeared because of the work that you and Commissioner Berry and Commissioner Crittenden and Director Rollins and obviously Commissioner Toomey, y'all are working together almost daily on these challenges, and I just want to make sure that I publicly thank you for and the rest of those health-related commissioners for the work that they're doing. And then obviously, you know, the folks in the education system that again, these youth that have these mental health challenges are part of our education system, and that's very challenging for us to deal with. Getting around to the point I'm making, you know, our facility in Southwest Georgia continues to have the mental health patients in our emergency room, and your group does a great job of helping us find placement. Unfortunately, you know, we're asking for help frequently for patients that aren't under your purview, those on Medicaid and those on commercial insurance, or they're part of the problem, but they're not your charge. But that being said, you guys are the experts. And so I'm just asking for, and I know I'll get it, cooperation, because that's still a huge issue, and we've got to figure out how to handle those folks that are continuing, especially in this COVID era, to take up space in our emergency rooms when we really don't have space. And it's going to take a partnership with all hands on deck. But I don't want anybody to think that I'm blaming you, because again, I think y'all's agency has done a lot of work in the last several years to help with that problem, and it is definitely better. But part of the issue is, even with the commercial patients, those with behavioral or mental health problems are super expensive, and the state could do a lot towards helping our state budget by improving those access points and taking care of those patients. And again, I just want to challenge your agency to help us over the next year or two to figure out how we can integrate holistically the mental health aspect of patient care in with our primary care, because I don't think we're going to be able to solve our budget crisis until we get a handle on that. So thank you.
So if I might respond just quickly, just first to say thank you for the kind words. You're right that the relationship between commissioners and partners here is forged in steel as a result of the pandemic. And you're also right that Ryan Loke has been an incredible ally in reinforcing the connectivity between the agencies. In the end, we're all serving people, right? And what we want is our Georgians to get the quickest access to what they need. You raise a very complex issue. Thank you for acknowledging our role as the public safety net, and you give us state dollars to serve individuals who are uninsured first and foremost. We will continue to do that, but we accept the challenge to say, how can we work more closely with our private partners? We do find in hundreds of crisis cases a year that we are on the phone with our private partners, really working hard to do whatever is possible. And I should mention, we have field offices all around the state. You reference, I know you're close with our field office personnel. They're on your speed dial, as they should be. Our department is positioned to help, and we want to meet folks at the highest level of need. So we'll continue, and it's really my hope and my belief that the Governor's Behavioral Health Reform and Innovation Commission was designed to do exactly this. This wasn't just about DBHDD, it really was about the needs for the state as a whole. So we're excited to see where that commission can lead recommendations and possibilities for the state. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Chairwoman Oliver.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One of our members is following your instructions about sending a question to me, and it's a very good question. Are there going to be any cuts in the peer-led substance abuse recovery program? That's a very popular program with a number of our members.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much for the question. We share your passion about peers. So very clearly, no cuts to peer services. As you can see, we only have enhancements in the budget this year. And I appreciate you mentioning peers, because I want to take the opportunity to shout out our peer workforce. So peers are individuals with lived experience. They are working all around our state tirelessly to be a connection for people with mental illness and substance use disorders. They ramped up during the pandemic in ways that are really incredible. They are a vital part of our workforce. And really, I think the challenges ahead is how to have more of them, how to infuse them more into the workforce and into our continuum of care. So we share our passion about Georgia as a leader in peer services, and lifting them up is what we continue to hope to do.
Chairman England.
Okay, I've got one question online, Commissioner, from Representative Carolyn Hughley, and just says, Commissioner Fitzgerald, I want to bring to your attention our interest in the Bradley Center providing added mental health services in its crisis stabilization unit in Columbus. Also, what is the status of the discussed pilot project for outpatient treatment as part of the Behavioral Health Reform and Innovation Commission?
Okay, so 2 questions. I want to make sure that I get to both of them. So to the first one, yes, familiar with the Bradley Center. It's one of, as I mentioned, crisis units around the state. And those are vital to the safety net. And so we hear from communities all around the state, some for whom those crisis centers are really doing just what they're intended to do, which is serve people in crisis in their community. And there are other communities that are seeking more. They would either like a unit or enhanced beds. And so we continue. One of the things I'm really proud of over the last several years, we've really have a sophisticated data collection system to understand where the greatest needs are in the state. So when we come to you seeking more support for crisis services, we do that in a reflection of what the data tells us where the needs are. So we're constantly looking at that. So I want to assure you of that. The second question, I believe the question perhaps was about assisted outpatient treatment, which I understand has been brought forward as a recommendation of the Behavioral Health Commission that was referenced. So just to be clear, I'm not sure, I don't believe the report and the recommendations are finalized yet. When they are finalized, we look forward to working with the governor's office and the General Assembly to consider what are priorities out of those recommendations and what would be considered for appropriations to provide the services and supports that are perhaps recommended. So we're looking forward to the official report from the commission.
We had a message from Senator Sims, a virtual message, and she has an issue down in her district and would ask if you don't mind, please, contacting her at your earliest convenience so that she could address that with you offline.
Thank you. I am aware, and I know our team is working with her, so we can make sure we close the loop there. Happy to do that.
Thank you. Pro Tem Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner Fitzgerald, thank you very much for your work, and DBHDD is an important part of our safety net and lends quality of life to a whole host of Georgians. The new 988 program, the mental health crisis hotline or lifeline, I think it's called. Can you tell us a little bit about it briefly? I know you only got a moment or two. And also, what changes are you going to have to make to accommodate that? And how can we as the legislature help accommodate it? Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you so much. And thank you for your tireless advocacy for the people we serve and support. So very quickly, 988, you saw it on the slide. I'm so happy to have a chance to make mention of it. So if you didn't hear this in the national news, 988 is the number that the FCC, the Federal Communications, designated as an easy to dial 3-digit number that would give everyone an access to the National Suicide Prevention Hotline. This occurred in the summer of 2020. It was something we had advocated for a long time. So in the summer, FCC made the designation. In October, the president signed into law a bill saying that by 2022, all telecommunications companies should be prepared for phones when they dial 988 to go directly to the National Suicide Prevention Hotline. This is one of the biggest transformations in our behavioral health system that I think we're going to see. It's like 911 for behavioral health. So the good news for Georgia is that, as I referenced, we have our GCAL, our Georgia Crisis and Access Line. We have an infrastructure in place to receive emergency calls 24/7. Right now, actually, when the National Suicide Prevention Hotline gets a call from Georgia, they send it to GCAL. So we already have some of the basic infrastructure in place. So we are ahead of most states on this count. But to your point, there's going to be a really critical need for enhanced infrastructure to address what we think is going to be a significant increased volume of calls that might come to Georgia. And we want to be able to be responsive. So we look forward to working with you closely. We are in a small planning group with some national leaders that are really responding on how to build appropriately to get ready for 2022. But we look forward to keeping you updated on that and letting you know as we roll forward what some of the infrastructure needs might be. We're excited about the opportunity, but we are going to need your partnership to address it. So thank you. Thanks. I'm glad you asked.
Chairwoman Dempsey.
Yes, just real quick. Thank you, of course, for everything and for this great presentation this morning. As we break into subcommittees, we'll have a little more time to discuss this. But quickly, before we walk away, I know there's been so much national data published recently about the uptick in behavioral health issues and particularly the record numbers of overdoses during the pandemic. And just I know you're seeing a lot in Georgia. If you have a quick response to what you're seeing, but also how our system is coping with these huge increases.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. And again, thanks for the partnership and the ongoing dialogue throughout the pandemic. So I think as most folks know, it's been widely reported in the national and state media about the impact of the pandemic on mental health and substance use disorders. This is really important. And I actually want to talk about two things. One is just average folks who didn't think that they had any mental health issues, but the impact of social isolation, anxiety, job loss, all the other things that have come with the pandemic have really increased awareness for people about how important their mental health and well-being is, and really challenged to say, how do I take care of it during the pandemic? The other population of great concern to us, of course, are people already known to our system who are already challenged with mental illness and substance use disorders. You are correct. There has been an uptick in use of crisis services and in substance use disorders and emergency room visits for overdoses and increase in addiction. So a couple of things that we've done to respond. First, really proud of our team. We set up an emotional COVID line for people to call. So this is whether or not you had ever experienced any mental illness or challenges before, but you really just needed to talk with someone. We had a support line that people could call into. It relieved the pressure on GCAL and the volume of calls there and enabled people to have a lifeline that they could call. Our peers also stood up they have a warm line that remains available throughout the pandemic for people who need to talk to someone about their concerns about their mental health and addiction challenges. We received federal grant money to identify special populations within the pandemic, people who might experience domestic violence, people at risk of suicide. So we have put a number of awareness raising and prevention activities in place in local communities to really try to reach out as best we can to folks all around the state and let them know the resources that are available. And we'll continue to do that. So I appreciate the question because it remains really current as COVID continues to really present challenges all around the state. Thank you.
Commissioner, thank you. That's all the time we have for your presentation today. We went a little over, but we definitely feel that your agency is one of those that is worth doing so. Thank you also to your crew for helping us as we've tried to address therapeutic foster care and residential psychiatric facilities over the past interim, and also helping team with us as we work to address the ADA settlement issues that I know are important to you as well. Again, thank you for your presentation today. Thank you for your team members for being present as well.
Thanks to you. We really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Next, we have with us Director Farr from the Office of Planning and Budget.
Morning, Mr. Chairman. Can y'all see and hear me okay?
We got you. Go ahead.
Good morning, Chairman England, Chairman Tillery, and members of the committee. At times, it's hard to believe how much has changed since I did this just 12 months ago. While every year brings change, I'm not sure of a year that brought as much as 2020. Many of us have lost loved ones way too early. There are many new faces. Extra duties have been assigned at most agencies. And there seems to be a new challenge almost daily right now. All of this can seem daunting and overwhelming. However, even in the face of these challenges, I continue to be inspired and motivated by the people I get to work with during these tough times. I want to thank you, Chairman England, and Chairman Tillery, Martha Wigton, Melody Debussy, and the staff at the House and Senate budget offices. The budget report before you today would not have been possible without all of you and your team at my team at OPB. As the pandemic began, you reached out to pledge your help. We are grateful and better from your help. When the legislative session was interrupted last spring, we all worked together very closely to pivot and quickly write a budget almost from scratch. Pretty soon after the session wrapped up in June, we were back at it, working together again on a number of projects through the summer and fall, many of which I believe are reflected in the governor's budget proposal. I believe this process has helped my team better understand certain issues, and it's invaluable for us to have the perspective of the General Assembly when we are doing our work. I also appreciate the feedback and insight that I've personally gotten from each of you this fall ahead of the governor introducing his budget, and I hope that we will continue this close working relationship between all of our teams going forward. When we did meet last spring, we were faced with an unprecedented situation with very little idea of what the longer term financial implications would be on the economy as a result of the pandemic. As Governor Kemp said on Tuesday, we made difficult but proactive decisions in June that have really positioned us well for the budgets that he presented to you this week. The original FY21 budget that the General Assembly had passed in June cut more than $1.6 billion from the base FY20 budget. This amended FY21 budget restores just over $650 million of that. And I'm so relieved that our actions in June meant that we are not having to further cut agency budgets in the final quarter of this fiscal year. Instead, we were able to restore vital funds to our K-12 and higher education systems in both the amended budget and also in the general budget. But as Chairman Hill has always reminded me, Georgia is usually last into a recession and the last out. To date, through FY21, our revenues have performed very well compared to FY20. Through last month, the Treasury reports general fund collections running 4.7% ahead of FY20 collections. However, we are only now entering tax filing season. And as Dr. Dorfman shared with you all on Tuesday, we do expect refunds to be substantially higher this year as a result of both individual job losses and corporate profit losses. As a result, we will not know where we stand for this fiscal year until the end of May. So the revenue estimate for AFY21 is still 2.5% below the actual general fund revenues we received in FY20. However, as we look ahead optimistically to a more return to normal next year as we accelerate vaccine distribution, the FY22 budget assumes a 3.7% general fund increase in revenues over the current year. This would be a growth rate more typical in an out-year budget. As the governor said, supporting our school systems, teachers, employees, and students is a priority of his administration. Therefore, of the $654 million restored in the amended FY21 budget, $647 million of that will be going directly to K-12 education. Both the amended and general budgets restore 60% of the reduction taken in the original FY21 budget for local school systems. Those restorations and the $2.1 billion local schools will receive through the Federal Education Stabilization Fund, we will be able to ensure that our schools have the resources they need to continue providing a quality education during this pandemic and will not be negatively impacted by any temporary enrollment declines they may have experienced due to the pandemic. Chairman England, during the summer, when the governor issued his flat budget instructions to agencies, you reiterated this year wouldn't be just flat like a pancake, but flat like a crepe. And I do believe that you'll see throughout these budgets that most of our agencies are flat like a crepe. We've had agencies find innovative ways to do more with less and to effectively manage their budgets while still meeting the mission of their agencies. So with our flat as a crepe budget, I do want to take a minute to focus on some tremendous items included in this budget that we are funding through redirected savings. Working closely with the Department of Corrections and Department of Juvenile Justice, we were able to identify $26.7 million in funds that could be redirected through more strategic position and overtime management. These budgets authorize those agencies to use those funds to provide a 10% pay increase effective April 1, which would be on average $3,500 per correctional officer, to our more than 4,600 correctional officers in recognition of the tremendous work these officers do every day and have done for the last 10 months during the pandemic in protecting the facilities in which they serve. We are also recommending $28.5 million in FMAP savings in the amended budget for DBHDD to provide additional community services for some of our most vulnerable Georgians. Those increased FMAP savings will also provide $3.5 million for the Department of Human Services that we will use to address the increase in adoption caseloads. I also want to take a moment to give you all a brief update on how the state has utilized the coronavirus relief funds, also known as CRF. As you likely are aware, last month, Congress extended the deadline for utilizing those funds until December 31st of this year. And we are very appreciative of those actions that gives Georgia greater flexibility in using those funds for ongoing critical needs as the pandemic continues. For Georgia, we tried to be cautious in allocating our funds to date to ensure that we would have sufficient resources to see us through this crisis. While other states have almost fully obligated all of the funds they have received, leaving them little flexibility to meet changing or ongoing needs for their states, Georgia has prudently taken steps to ensure our funds will last. To date, we have provided local governments with more than $365 million from the fund to assist them in covering costs they may have incurred within their local communities related to COVID-19 response. The governor has also dedicated approximately $78 million for COVID testing for staff within our long-term care facilities across the state. And he recently extended that grant deadline to continue through June in order to assist our facilities as vaccines are distributed to residents and staff. We will be using $60 million of the CRF funds to provide additional support to local school systems for expenses related to the safe reopening of schools. We have committed $350 million for medical staff augmentation to support our hospitals and nursing home facilities. We have needed additional physicians and nurses to care for their patients during this time. And we have spent more than $300 million on PPE and state agency responses. And finally, the governor has set aside $1.5 billion to date to be used towards our state's unemployment insurance trust fund. At the beginning of April last year, our UI trust fund stood at more than $2.5 billion. By August, UI claims during the spring and summer had fully depleted the trust fund. As a point of comparison, the state spent about $300 million in UI claims in the entire previous year. Since August, we have used more than $994 million from the Coronavirus Relief Fund to repay advances on the UI Trust Fund needed to continue to pay out benefits. While Congress's extension of enhanced UI benefits will provide much needed economic support to individual Georgians, as well as to our state revenues, it will continue to put heavy demands on Georgia's UI Trust Fund. In order to continue to pay out benefits, we will continue to need federal advances on the Coronavirus Relief Fund until claim levels drop to where incoming contributions from employers exceed benefits being paid out. While the federal government has provided direct financial support for pandemic needs like COVID testing, vaccine distribution, and food and housing assistance for citizens, federal stimulus bills have not directly addressed the financial impact on individual state unemployment insurance trust funds. Unless we continue to leverage the CRF to repay advances as they are incurred, the state will otherwise be forced to rely on increased UI taxes for Georgia employers to repay these federal loans while covering any interest on those loans directly through our state budget. Therefore, I believe it's imperative that we reserve as much as possible for the remaining and unobligated $440 million of coronavirus relief funds for direct state COVID-19 response efforts and to keep our UR Trust Fund balance positive. Now, with regards to OPB's budget, the only change to our budget is a small adjustment for the statewide change for the teacher retirement system for next year, and we will be able to manage that within our existing budget. Thank you for the time this morning, and at this time, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Director Farr. Do we have any questions from members in the audience? We do not have any questions in the audience. We don't have any questions online either. Director Farr, thank you for walking through how some of the federal dollars have been spent and how they've impacted the budget that may not be reflected in the book that we have in front of us. And thank you for your presentation. We do have one question that's come up from Pro Tem Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not sure this is the appropriate place, but I was wondering about the income, the support, the continuance of the Georgia World Congress Center and how it has been hit so hard. And if we might have some comments or thoughts. I mean, I think they've 400 employees. I think they're down to about less than 100. And any thoughts, Kelly, if you don't mind?
I mean, I think a lot of our authorities have been challenged this year because of lost revenue, right? I think, Georgia World Congress Center, Ag Expo, Stone Mountain Authority, Ports Authority. I mean, they've all been hit pretty hard. And so I think it's going to take all of these folks a little bit of time to dig out of that hole. I would think as it relates to the World Congress Center specifically, I know it doesn't replace all of the big, great lost events they have, but, they are getting a little bit of money from renting it out for the COVID response. They're doing it down there. There is some money in the budget to help in the bond package to offset some maintenance expenses. And so I don't know if that answers your question, but I think a lot of the authorities are going to be challenged for a little while.
Thank you very much.
Chairman England, do we have any other questions online?
Yes, we've got one from Senator Orrock. What is the thinking on how to break the logjam at the Department of Labor for suffering Georgians with reduced income or no income due to COVID? Can we use National Guard services as is done by some other states?
I don't know. I don't know that I have an answer for that. I do know that the Department of Labor has received federal administrative funds to help undertake some of the, remarkable amount of workload they've received since the pandemic was started. I'm not aware of National Guard being used for such instances, but that's not something I'm familiar with.
Chairman England, do you have any comments?
Yes, sir. I just, Director Farr, you're very kind in your comments, and I just want to reciprocate as well. Thank you for the teamwork that we've been able to accomplish over the last 10, 11 months now since we've been in this situation we found ourselves, and kind of recalling a phone conversation that you and I and Chairman Hill had back, I guess it was in March, that the only way that we're all going to get through this is we'll go through it together. And you and your folks have been incredible, and I know our folks have done everything that they've known to do as well, and just appreciate the working relationship that we have, and the input that you've, as you mentioned a minute ago, that you've allowed us to have, both the House and the Senate, in the crafting of the governor's budget, and know that we're going to continue to work together as we continue to dig into the amended and getting to something that we can get to the governor's desk fairly quickly here, so that should we have to take a pause, the good news is our testing numbers are looking real good at folks coming and going here. So hopefully that does not occur. But should we have to, being able to get an amended budget done, so our state agencies, our school systems, and all those that depend on items within the state budget will know what they have to finish out this year into June. Hopefully, prayerfully, we don't wind up back here the last 2 weeks of June to finish up the budget for next fiscal year. That is not fun, especially for our colleagues in the Senate, when the posture we found ourselves in was that they were the ones having to start from scratch, basically. And again, I'm just so proud at what our teams have done. Senate Budget Evaluation Office, House Budget Research Office, and the team there at OPB to get us through all of this. It has not been easy. I know you have had many sleepless nights throughout this process, and I know that you carry an awful lot of the burden yourself for people that are suffering, and I appreciate that. I know we all do. And I'll leave it at that. And Mr. Chairman, I think we may have one question in the room.
Chairman Watson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Farr, thank you for the job you've done. Just curious, I know there's been some more funds released. Do you foresee any more COVID funds coming to help the state and the schools in the future? And do you have any of those numbers yet, or can you speak to that yet, or is what we've got and we need to be careful as we move forward?
Well, I mean, we have recently, I mean, within the last, still kind of funneling out right now, but, over Christmas time, they did pass an additional, $900 billion package. So that's where you've seen like a lot of this additional money for school systems, like there's $1.7 billion in that for school systems. There's close to $800 million in that for DPH, to help with vaccine distribution and testing, and child development block grant money. So, we're still seeing some of that stuff kind of trickle out now as people peel apart what it all means. We really haven't seen a whole lot of direct state and local government support since the CARES Act over the summer. And as everybody probably knows, we can't use that to help offset any lost revenue or expenses that were contemplated in the previous budget or that were not directly related to being reimbursed for COVID expenses. I have seen, a few comments come out from President Biden and his team about their intentions of their package. I think it's in like the $1.2 billion range. I know that in that outline, I saw about $350 billion for state and local governments, as well as more money for school systems and testing response and things like that. And until that actually gets passed and we kind of see I hate using the word strings, but the obligations that it creates for the state in other ways, I really, at this point, don't know how it could or could not impact the needs for the budget right now.
Thank you, Director. You've exhausted the questions in the room. Again, thank you for the kind words you said about the Senate Budget Office as well as the House Office. I appreciate the work that and the candor that you've provided throughout this process as we try to make it as seamless as possible and also include as many member comments, knowing that they represent the issues back home that matter to their constituents and all Georgians. Senator Orrick, if you can still hear me, if you have that information about National Guard folks elsewhere, please get it to me and I'll make sure I share it with the director as well. Director Farr, that's the end of the comments in the room, and thank you again for your presentation.
Thank you all again. I really appreciate it, sincerely.
Committee members, we have now reached the end of our agenda for the 3 days of joint appropriations hearings. Let me tell you, thank you for your presentation or for being involved, both those of you who are involved here personally in the room and those who've been involved across the state. This was the first time we tried it this way. And I think that it worked incredibly well, particularly given the first time that it happened. The reason that it worked so well, though, is because of our colleagues in the House who truly bent over backwards to make sure this process was seamless, even though that was the Senate's year to host. So thank you, Chairman England. Thank you, Speaker Ralston. Thank you also to the House Media Services Office, who truly did bend over backwards to make sure that we could make this work. If the members in the room don't mind, I would like to give them a round of applause. This has gone so well, it may be something that we want to extend into times even when we do not have to do this. So be thinking about that. You may get a questionnaire that goes out later from us asking how we can do things better. Even though we think this worked pretty well, we always realize that we can do things better on our end. And as we look at doing things better for our citizens of the state, as we do every year, we need to make sure we're looking internally to make sure our processes are working as smooth as they can as well. For you as members to be able to do your jobs back home, but also so that we can make sure we're open and honest and transparent to the almost now 11 million Georgians who we all have the pleasure of representing. Thank you, Senate Budget Office, Melody, for you and your help through this process. Martha, the House Budget Office as well. And Chairman England, if you have any closing comments you'd like to make.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to echo the same things that Chairman Tillery just said to our friends at Senate Budget Evaluation Office. Thank you for setting the schedule and getting everybody lined up there, and to Martha and our team on our side for the work that was involved in helping there. Again, a huge hat tip to Betsy Theroux and the team at the House Media Services. I'll be honest with you, I've been scared to death for about 2 weeks knowing that this was the format we were going to be using. I am not a IT person and had no idea how in the world this was all going to work. But Betsy and her team have made this incredibly easy, almost scarily easy of how well this has worked. And we just so much appreciate the job that they've done and helping us with it all. A couple of housekeeping items for our House members. Please note that you have gotten email invites to subcommittee meetings starting today and that will be running tomorrow. It is important that those of you that are on these subcommittees, be on those Zoom. These will be virtual. Some will be hybrid, virtual, in-person type meetings as well. But it is very important, again, based on the need to get the amended budget done in case we have to hit the pause button at some point. We're on a very accelerated pace this year, more so than normal. And right now, the plan and the intention is that our subcommittees will all meet here in person on Tuesday. Some folks may do it virtually as well then too, but to vote out the final recommendations from the subcommittees on Tuesday. So it's very important that you be in attendance today and tomorrow on those hearings, because that is when the work is going to be done. Some decisions will be made, of course, as to some changes or any changes that are going to be recommended to the governor's recommendation. so that we can compile and balance in time for you all then to meet to vote those reports out on Tuesday. Mr. Chairman, that's all I've got. I appreciate everyone's attendance. I appreciate we've had outstanding attendance, not only in person, but we have had incredible attendance online from our members and participation. I appreciate, again, y'all working with us as we try to figure out the chat feature and how to use that to receive questions and then ask it. And as Chairman Tillery said, I think it really surprises all how well or how smooth it seemed to have worked, at least from up here, from this vantage point. And just thank you again to everybody, and thank you to Chairman Tillery. Appreciate him and the work we've gotten to do together over the last several months, and looking forward to many years to come. Thank you.
This was our first budget hearing first full year budget hearing, joint budget hearing without Senator Hill. And I know many of you still miss him. These probably would have run even smoother had he been here. And we all miss him, but I hope that we have done him proud by our work these past 3 days. I know we will make him proud by the work we will do over the next few weeks as we work to make sure that those 11 million Georgians we have the pleasure of representing are represented in this budget. So thank you again for being a part of these meetings. Well, we will adjourn now. Remember, we will join back at 1 o'clock for the federal block grant hearings for FY22. Thank you again for being here. And those of you who have to be back at 1 o'clock, we'll see you at 1 o'clock. That's my gavel for today. A strong left hand there. Thank you. We'll call this federal block grant meeting to order. The legislative public hearing on block grants is hereby called to order. First, let me introduce myself. I'm Senator Blake Tillery. I represent the people of the 19th Senate District. Sitting on the podium with me is Representative and Chairwoman Katie Dempsey, representing the people of the 13th District in the State House. Michael Pollock is representing the House Budget and Research Office, and Caitlin Little is representing the Senate Budget and Evaluation Office. Also with us is Demetrius Taylor, the CFO and Budget Director for the Department of Human Services. Mr. Taylor, thank you for being here. Before we get started, is there anyone who requires sign language or interpreter services? If so, please identify yourself so our interpreter can position themselves properly. We don't see anyone who is asking for those services, but we still do have the interpreter in the room. Thank you for attending today's block grant hearing. The purpose of the hearing is to receive public comments on the use of 5 human service block grants that Georgia receives from the federal government. The hearing also provides the members of the Georgia legislature the opportunity to listen to the views of private citizens and other interested parties on how block grant funds should be used for the state fiscal year 2022, which will begin July 1st of 2021. These block grants are Community Mental Health Block Grant, the Community Services Block Grant, the Low Income Home Energy Assistance Block Grant, the Social Services Block Grant, and the Substance Abuse Prevention and Treatment Block Grant. Public input is an important aspect of the deliberate process of the Georgia legislature and what it undertakes in making decisions about the state's budget. Thank you for taking the time to participate with us in this process. At this time, Demetrius Taylor will provide a brief summary of the grants and explain how we will proceed. Please welcome Mr. Taylor.
Thank you, Senator Blake Tillery. As Senator Tillery has stated, the Department of Human Services will receive public comments on 3 federal block grants today. By federal law, Georgia is required to hold public hearings on these grants. These 3 grants are the Community Services Block Grant, Low Income Home Energy Assistance Block Grant, and the Social Services Block Grant. At this time, I will give an overview of each of these grants. The Community Services Block Grant provides funds for services and activities that impact the causes of poverty and to assist low-income participants. These funds are distributed to local agencies throughout the state and fund a wide range of services, including employment, education, meals and nutrition services, and housing services. The Low-Income Home Energy Assistance Block Grant provides cash assistance to qualified low-income households for home energy costs, weatherization costs such as insulation, caulking, and weather stripping, to reduce energy consumption and for energy crisis intervention. Finally, the Social Services Block Grant funds various services such as daycare services for children, adult and persons with mental retardation, home delivered meals, homemaker services, transportation, and protective services for adults and children. This grant also assists families to achieve and or maintain self-support and self-sufficiency. At this time, I will now provide a brief overview of the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Disabilities 2 federal block grants. The Community Mental Health Services Block Grant implements the provisions of the Mental Health State Plan by providing services to individuals with a serious mental illness and to children with serious emotional disturbance. And the Substance Abuse Prevention and Treatment Block Grant provides funds for community-based alcohol and drug treatment, prevention and early intervention programs. More details about each of these grants, including types of programs that can be funded and their proposed funding levels, are included in the color-coded pamphlets available on the table outside of this room. There's a separate pamphlet for each grant. Before receiving your comments, let me go over a few ground rules. We will take speakers in the order in which they sign up to speak. If you have not signed up yet, you may do so at the table outside. Please give us your name and the name of the organization you represent. If there's more than one representative here from the same organization, please choose one from your organization to speak. By doing this, we will ensure that each organization and citizen gets a fair chance to comment. You will be given 5 minutes in which to present your comments. There is a timekeeper who will let you know when you have 1 minute left. I will initially call 2 speakers at the podium at a time. I would initially call as the first person is speaking, the next speaker should be making his or her way to the podium. Then as I call your name, please make your way to the podium. If you have written comments or for the record, a copy of your speech, please place these on the table at the end of the meeting. Now let's begin. When I first checked to begin, there was no one signing up. And my runner states that there's still no one here that has signed up for the meeting today. So with that said, I would like to thank each of you for attending today's meeting. Now, I'll just turn it over to the panel to see if anybody else would like to speak. If not, I would like to thank Senator Blake Tillery, Representative Katie Dipsey, House Budget and Research Office, Michael, as well as Senate Budget and Evaluation Office, Katie Little. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Thank you for your participation today. Chairwoman Dempsey, do you have anything you'd like to add? We will continue to fund these block grants in our budget, even with public participation, no matter what, if there's a higher level or lower level, we'll continue to fund those the same. And thank you again for being here today. At this point in time, the meeting is adjourned.